Good afternoon. It's Friday. It's day 10 in the afternoon of the Alec Murdaugh murders trial. He is accused of killing his wife and son in a double homicide. Today, we have gotten into two different kinds of evidence. Today, we have seen testimony outside the presence of the jury and an in camera hearing regarding banking and financial malfeasance of the defendant. We also heard testimony from Gloria Satterfield's son. Gloria Satterfield was the house manager, nanny, housekeeper of the Murdaughs and died after falling at Moselle under circumstances that some have called suspicious, some have called an accident. We will see. What's not in controversy is that after that, Alec Murdaugh arranged for Gloria Satterfield's surviving sons to sue himself, to work with his friend Corey Fleming and to sue himself. Then they appointed a personal representative and looped the boys out of the entire thing, stealing over $4 million for them that was later recovered by another attorney who went up against it. That settlement was uncovered by the reporting of Mandy Matney. So with all of that, we heard from Gloria Satterfield's son in this 402. I think that's evidence that will come in because, again, they're saying Alec could never do this. Well, most people would think a lawyer could never steal from a client, and not just steal from a client, steal from the son of someone who worked in her house, in their household for over, 20 years. Most people would think someone couldn't do that either. So that's part of why that's coming in. And then we started getting into the lunch. The firearms expert. This is an expert who has linked together the casings from all around the property to the murder weapon of Maggie Murdaugh. We will hear more about the murder weapon of Paul Murdaugh. We have not gotten into the coroner's report yet, so we still don't have that. So those questions about which direction, which trajectory were bullets or buckshot going? What was the coroner's time of death? Those sorts of things are not in evidence yet. So court should be back in just a few minutes. I don't know if we'll hear any more about the 404s today. It feels kind of unresolved. Not kind of. It feels very unresolved to me. But that's where we're at. The Quick Bits episode, my shorter form podcast, will be up later today on your favorite podcasting app and on video. And then that's it. That's probably it for the weekend. So with that, we need to roll the intro and come back. I'm going to answer some questions as we're waiting for court to resume. Today's been a lot, y'all. How are you doing? What'd you have for lunch? I've got some fizzy water and some ice. I've got multiple tankards of water. Are y'all ready for the weekend? During Depp v. Heard, we had Fridays off from court while the attorneys were fighting over evidentiary objections, and those evidentiary objections weren't broadcast. So we all just kind of took the day on Friday. Yesterday at the end of court, did you guys see the judge? We've done enough work for today. Your Honor, we've done enough work for today. We're tired. And the state's not making it easy to follow what they're doing. And it's made all our brains hurt. Our brains are tired. This poor jury must just be like, man, what is going on? And with that, let's roll. Tell me what you're eating. Hey there, I'm Emily D. Baker, the internet's go-to legal analyst, breaking down the legal side of the pop culture and entertainment stories we can't stop talking about. I'm a big fan of the cursey words. I've been a licensed attorney for over 17 years, but this is not legal advice. This is where the law nerds unite to talk about facts, not. Let's get into it. I was still chewing ice. I hadn't finished, and I thought it was rude to chew into the mic, but I forgot we've shortened down the intro. So I wasn't quite ready. That's all right. You know why? We're professionals here. That's why. For the minimal amount of you that hate the sound effects, apologies. We're going to get lots of them this afternoon to keep me awake and entertained. My brain is very tired. We've missed it. Hold on, we're going back 5 seconds. No, we're not. The judge just said bring the jury.
Bring the jury.
He said it twice. Wait, that was the wrong sound effect. I feel like that's the appropriate response when the judge says bring the jury, right? Bring the jury and we get claps. Is claps the appropriate response after the judge says bring the jury? I think it is. I think that's the appropriate response. Bring the jury. Yeah, the defendant also looks tired today. Everybody looks tired today. The thing I'm looking for this afternoon is how well does the prosecution make it clear what the casings mean and what the tool marking means? How much do they tie back that Maggie Murdaugh was killed with a family gun, with family ammunition on her family estate, where the only evidence of people being present is of family being there? That. How clear do they make that? I can make it clear. I need them to make it clear. I'm not the prosecutor on this case. I am trying not to be hypercritical of the prosecutor on this case. And I'm failing.
Beginning with items, State's Exhibits 111, 112, 113, I believe right before we broke, I presented to counsel and was going to offer to the witness, and I believe it was without objection offered into evidence.
I'm sorry. That was me.
All right, Agent, or Mr.
I'm the
Greer,
problem. It's me.
please review what's been marked as State's Exhibit 111, 112, 113, which would align with.
I like Mr. Greer a lot. He's going through his list and connecting state's evidence to his lab numbers. He's a very thorough witness, and I like him.
If you had an opportunity to inspect those items and analyze them.
Yes, sir, I did. State's Exhibit 112 is SLED item 66, and that was determined to be 3 fired bullet jacket fragments and 7 pieces of lead listed as from Margaret Murdaugh at autopsy. State's Exhibit 11.
Okay, the echo was from them.
Yes, sir. Excuse me. I apologize. 111 is SLED item 69.
I'm sorry, I'm getting extra.
And that is one combination wad listed as
this is me.
from
Again.
left axilla of Paul Murdaugh at autopsy.
I had 2 feed audio open, and this feed's a few seconds behind so that we have closed captioning. I appreciate the closed captioning, and then it's.
In State's Exhibit 113 is SLED item 104. And that was 1 birdshot pellet listed as found with Paul Murdaugh's clothing.
Yeah, Alex.
Thank you.
I didn't chalk much up to Alex's behavior before the 404 hearings. Seeing his behavior during those hearings outside the presence of the jury and his behavior with the jury has changed my perception a bit.
Greer, I'm going to direct your attention to.
At the beginning,
State's
I thought he was
Exhibit
just self-soothing.
90.
Now I think he's just,
SLED
think-
item 31.
this is a bit more intentional, because when the jury was not in the room, he was laser focused on the
Do
witnesses.
you have an opportunity to inspect this item?
I did inspect a SLED item 31.
Is
This
this the item you inspected?
courtroom makes me tell the jury.
This firearm is unloaded, safe to handle. Yes, sir. I see my identifying marks.
This witness
SLED item
is
31 on this firearm.
Just
Tell
a
us what this
fucking
is.
boss, and I
And that
adore
was
him.
determined to be 1 Browning model Auto 5.
Did you
light
see
12
him check
semi-automatic
the locked
shotgun,
firearm? He's the
12
only
gauge
one.
with serial number
Checked the locked
03867
firearm.
V219.
Checked down the barrel.
And did you conduct further examinations on that firearm?
I like him.
Yes, sir, I did.
No one else did. Sir, can you give Alec Baldwin a call? Even the law enforcement, there was one of the law enforcement officers that kind of swung the weapon around in front of the jury, and it was like, ugh.
Item 30 on your report.
I like his clear dedication to what he does. And you can see it. You can see this firearm is rendered safe. You can see the padlock on it, and you can see.
Did you have an opportunity to inspect that firearm?
Look at the way he's expecting it in front of this jury.
This firearm is also unloaded.
I like him. The only witness that has been handed a weapon who has inspected it like that. The only one.
Yes, sir, I did.
And how do you know that?
When I'm looking at these firearms, we scribe our evidence if possible in multiple locations. So I'm looking for those identifying features of that SLED lab number and that item number, as well as my initials on some of these items that I was able to mark that. So I see that on this firearm.
Thank you.
Every court case, every witness who handles a firearm on the witness stand should look at it and say, this is safe for me to handle, to reassure the jury that it's safe.
For purposes of our results that we'll discuss
And
shortly,
to demonstrate their
did you conduct
professionalism and
additional testing on that
expertise.
firearm?
Yes, sir.
Handing you what's been marked as and entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 91. That'd be your SLED item number 32.
He is the expert in this area. His attention to detail shows. I think that, oh, not another unboxing. The amount of, the way that they're handling the weapons boxes in this case, they have no other room to do it. It's a small courtroom, but it just makes me so nervous that they're not going to end up back in the right box.
Tell me if you recognize that firearm. If you, in fact,
just
were the one that received it and conducted examinations on it.
The organization here is, it's a small courtroom. I get
This
it.
firearm's also unloaded. I'm going to look again for those identifying marks.
Alec Murdaugh sitting there going, so you wrote all over my weapons? Yes, they did. They wrote all over your weapons. You're not getting them back. Don't worry about it.
Yes, sir. I identify this as my SLED item 32.
You can see the writing at multiple places on the weapon for the different examiners that this weapon went through. Remember, this weapon was swabbed for DNA. The weapons were fingerprinted, and the weapons went to the firearm
Lastly, I'll direct your
analyst.
attention to
I don't know which order
what's
that
been
happened
entered into
in.
evidence as State's Exhibit 91. I'm sorry, State's Exhibit 88 and SLED item 33.
I assume that he has test fired a lot of these weapons, and that's why we're going through this. I hope we're not just doing this for funsies. I hope there's a reason why he's doing it. I think what he's about to hand him,
Are you familiar with
this
that item?
is the 300 blackout. This is the only 300 blackout that was recovered. This is the one with the thermal scope that we talked about before lunch. If you missed my whole breakdown
This firearm is also unloaded.
of the ARs right before lunch, go look at that. So this is the thermal scope 300 blackout.
Yes,
And
sir.
He's
I'm
looking
familiar
for
with
his
this
marking.
item.
Is that the item that you conducted tests on?
Yes, sir. This is the SLED item 33.
The chat's like, everyone has handled the weapon better than Binger. Yeah, Binger was being theatrical. Sometimes attorneys like to be theatrical. I mean, most of the time DAs like to be theatrical. Prosecutors like to be a
Direct your attention
bit
then
theatrical.
to State's Exhibit.
Binger, I think, got a little
210,
theatrical.
which would be SLED item 34.
Yeah, I think he test fired all of them.
It's been entered
Roadless.
into evidence.
I'm not too worried about it. I think the trial is important.
Collectively is State's item 210.
So
Are you
I'm not
familiar
going to
with the
load
contents
the evidence.
of that
But
evidence
thank you.
package?
I'm gonna let YouTube do
Yes,
its
sir, I am.
YouTube things.
And what are they?
It's fine.
SLED item 34, State's Exhibit 210, was determined to be one magazine and
Not a
26
clip?
unfired cellular and billow 300 blackout caliber cartridges.
It was SLED item 34, but this State's Exhibit 210 included with the rifle we just took a look at.
Yes, sir. It was submitted in the same package as the rifle.
I saw this is, I was trying to get to, will the family be able to get the weapons back? They can request them after trial, after appeal.
Moving on to.
I don't know if Buster would want them. Maybe his brother would. It depends. They're not the murder weapons. They're just
State's
weapons that were
Exhibit
taken for evidence.
143
Alec's not going to get them back. Could his
through-
family try to claim them
Sorry,
after
State's Exhibit
appeal?
143, 144,
If he's convicted,
150,
it would be after appeal.
and 148.
If he's not
Entered into
convicted,
Evidence already, that would be SLED items.
if he's not convicted, it goes faster.
166, 167, 168, and 169.
I was trying to save our ears from all the.
Everything what's been marked as those exhibits. Would you please take a chance to review those? Let me know if you're familiar with them and if you had an opportunity to analyze them.
I was trying to save us all from the paper rustling. So he's going to go through each. It would be so hard to keep that organized on your lap. I appreciate that he's going to review each one, though.
Yes, sir. I believe I have seen these items.
Okay.
Thank you,
Tell us what they are, if
Puddlegum.
you would.
Alter the World, thank you. Question, where was Alec M. when his father died? They were all
each of these
doing those
four
police
items
interviews.
are 12 gauge federal shot
I'll
shells,
come back to that.
and they each all have the markings that are consistent with each other: a federal premium double aught buck 3-inch Magnum.
Do your notes indicate where they were located?
I have an indication based on the packaging.
Okay, what did the packaging indicate?
Very precise.
The packaging for State's Exhibit 150, from what I can tell, says from red bin on workshop bench. For State's Exhibit 144 says from red bin on workshop bench. State's Exhibit 143 says from red bin on workshop bench. And State's Exhibit 148 also says from red bin on workshop bench.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot happening in this trial every single day. This courtroom is small, but it's
Now I'm going to hand you what's been
just so
previously
much.
entered into evidence as State's Exhibits 145, 146, 147, and 149. That would be SLED's number 162, 163, 164, and 165.
We absolutely need demonstratives in this trial. They
Same as
haven't,
before. If you wouldn't mind, please
and I don't know why.
take a look at those and let me know if you are familiar with their contents.
Rebecca, it's my understanding that it took the medical examiner a little longer than that, and that they had 2 funerals. But it's my understanding it took a little longer than that. So, but autopsies, it depends on how many other autopsies are waiting in line to do them. But once they do, the weighing, the measuring, once all the tests are normally what takes a long time, the blood tests and things. Once they don't need the remains still to do all of
Yes,
those
sir.
tests.
Okay. Tell us what they are.
All 4 of these
John
items
Marvin's there. I think John Marvin's wife is there.
are Winchester 12 gauge shot shells, and they all appear to have the same information on the shot shell of dry lock 3-inch with the number 2.
So these are dry lock shot shells. Those were a big deal because the defense said that no dry lock was found on the property. And
I'll hand you what's been
they are.
previously entered
I
into
think that was
evidence as
Randy,
State's Exhibit 213,
next to John Marvin in front of
item
Chanley.
45. Please take a look at that.
Randy looks
piece
a
of
lot like
evidence and
Buster.
Let me know if you are aware of what it is.
I think that's both of Alex Buster's, Randy, and John Marvin sitting in front of Chanley Painter. on Court TV.
Yes, sir. This appears to be a box for ammunition in the 300 blackout caliber.
And does that box indicate the maker of that 300 blackout ammunition?
It does.
Who's the manufacturer?
Cellier and Billow.
S&B?
Yes, sir.
All right, this is State's Exhibit 260, which was previously marked for identification purposes only.
Yes, Chanley's in orange with the glasses.
35, 36, 37, 38, and 39.
We have not seen any of Maggie's family attending.
Mr. Greer, I'm handing you what's been now admitted into evidence as State's Exhibit 260. Please take if you would, please take a moment to review those items and let me know if you're familiar with them.
about the badges in court. There are different badges for witnesses, press, and then audience members.
Yes, sir. I am familiar with this evidence.
And what are they?
These are SLED items 35 through 39. These were each fired 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases with the head stamp of Cellier and Bello.
Thank you. What's been marked previously as State's Exhibit 261 for identification purposes only. This would reference SLED item numbers 108 to 135.
The courtroom sketch artist is sitting by the defense table.
Collectively,
She was in the jury box earlier this morning when the jury was out for the 403, 404 hearings. Like if my brain's tired, I can imagine how much everybody else's brain is tired.
Agent Greer, these items now admitted under State's Exhibit 261. Please take a moment to review those items, any notes or information you might have on them, and let me know if you're aware of what they are.
Yes, container AB was submitted to the laboratory, and it is to contain SLED items 108 through 135. I am familiar with these items, and this package appears to not have been tampered with since I sealed it last, as I see my initials and seal date there at the bottom.
And what's inside that package?
Inside this package, there are
a lot of
300 blackout
shot
caliber
shell
cartridge
casings,
cases, as well as 12 gauge shot shells.
So
And
what's
did you have
on
an
his lab
opportunity
looks
to
like
perform
his
analysis
witness
on
list.
these items?
Yes, sir, I did.
Are you going to have him unbox them? No? No? I guess not. I've seen a lot of questions about why would they have a sketch artist. A, it's a general part of the record. B, the sketch artist may cover this courthouse regularly. C, the attorneys can commission a sketch artist if they want to. So there are a lot of reasons why they might have a courtroom sketch artist. I like
Mr. Greer, I'm
courtroom
offering
sketch. It's a really interesting way to see
what's
the
been marked as
trial.
State's Exhibit 398. That would reference SLED item 22.4. And I believe without objection, we'll offer it as evidence. Right. If you would, please take a look at that item and cross-reference with your report and let me know if you're familiar with what it is.
Yes, sir. This container contains two SLED items. That's SLED item 22.4, which is a swab of debris that I took, a reddish brown debris swab from the right side of the item 22 receiver.
Which item is 22?
Item 22 was the camouflage Benelli model Super Black Eagle 3
Oh.
semi-automatic shotgun.
Wait, what?
And it also contains SLED item 22.5, which was another swab from that same shotgun. And that was reddish brown debris swab from the left side of the item 22 receiver
What?
above manufacturer information.
And tell us a little bit about the swabs and what you're
Who
looking for
tested
with
it?
that.
Wait, we have questions.
Yes, sir.
Oh, we're going to have to wait.
When I receive items of evidence, a part of my process in documenting the evidence and opening the evidence is to look to see if there's any foreign or trace material on that item. When I was examining this firearm and opening it for the first time, I took note of that. And when I did that, I noticed those two areas that I saw reddish brown debris. In order to preserve that prior to my examination, I swabbed those items so that way they could be collected and maintained.
If that is Maggie or Paul's DNA on the gun that Alec was holding when the police showed up We have a much different case than we did this morning. A much different case.
All right, Mr. Greer, I'm handing you what's been
So they're
marked
gonna have to
as
test it,
State's
'cause these are
Exhibit
hunting
399,
rifles.
which references SLED item 22.7. State would offer that into evidence after you identify it, and I believe without objection.
So I wouldn't be surprised that you would have potential blood on a hunting rifle. But the process, we have heard that Maggie's DNA was on a weapon.
Yes, sir. I do recognize
don't
this.
know
And
if
this
it's
package
this
is
weapon.
still sealed with my initials and seal date. Item 22.7 was the unfired 12-gauge shot shell that was submitted with the item 22 camouflage Benelli Super Black Eagle 3 shotgun. During my testing, I used that submitted ammunition that came with the firearm to test fire the weapon with, and that is represented here as SLED item 22.7, State's Exhibit 399.
Okay. Submitted.
If, again, that will have been tested, that will be tested for if it's blood, and it'll be tested for DNA. Who that belongs to is critical.
In your results, if you would, please
We've heard that Maggie doesn't like to
tell
hunt.
me a
She
little
came
bit
to
about
Moselle
the
to be with the
firearms
dogs.
identification process and the number of ways that you use to identify whether a firearm shot a particular
Oh, I have
projectile.
thought. I have a lot of thoughts.
Sure.
I have thoughts.
As we were discussing earlier, when I receive evidence into the laboratory and I begin my examination, there's a lot of documentation that has to happen. First, as we're opening the evidence, we're going to, one, make sure to preserve any of that trace or foreign material. We use photography to document the evidence as we're opening it and to photograph the actual item itself and that trace material or foreign material. We also use a lot of departmental worksheets where I take notes on the firearm, the magazine, the fired components such as the cartridge case or the bullet, and also any other thing that we need to document throughout the process, or unfired cartridges. We take note of all of that, writing down all of these characteristics that we're seeing on
Don't
the
knock
evidence.
my pens off the desk,
In
buddy.
order to do our examination, though, we have to look at these fired ammunition components, these cartridge cases and these fired bullets, and look at their class characteristics. So we're going to count on a bullet. We're going to look at its rifling, trying to determine its caliber through weight and measuring it.
This is
And,
Paul's 12 gauge.
Counting those number of lands and grooves that comprise that rifling, like we spoke earlier, that's what gives that bullet that twist. We document that. We may also look at those cartridge case and look at those things that have same class characteristics. That could be the caliber of that cartridge case, the shape of that firing pin, and any overall features. Items that share the same class characteristics will compare together. And it's kind of like climbing a ladder at this point. Those items that share the same class characteristics, we climb to the next step on that ladder and we compare those items. We're going to look at those fired bullets with each other, those fired cartridge cases with each other, and we're going to look at all of that under high magnification. We use a comparison microscope in our laboratory to look at these items. And basically, if you think back to a biology lab that you may have had in school or some kind of science lab, when you look through a microscope,
Okay, sir.
that's
Thank you
what
for
we're
telling us
doing,
about
but we're
microscopes.
using just comparison
These will have
microscope.
already been tested. We just don't know which witness tested it.
We've used,
That'll be
used an
testified to
ocular
later.
Bridge, so we can look through like a set of binoculars to look at these things. We can change the angles that we're looking at all these tiny
This
little
is
scratches
this
and
is
striations and
presumptively
impressions
blood on the gun.
evidence, that you can't really see with the naked eye. We're going to look at it under that magnification
And Maggie's
and compare
blood could get on the
all
hand,
of that
the gun
to each
from
other to help us reach our final goal,
a number
which is
of
a
things.
conclusion. If we have firearms that are submitted, we'll also have that documented. Those firearms that have the same class characteristics, for instance, if we have a
Fred.
gun that's the same caliber as our fired bullet and it shares the same rifling specifications, then that means we can compare that bullet with test fires from the firearm. So I'll make sure the firearm is safe to fire, and we'll shoot that firearm within our laboratory. We have several different ways to do that with a water recovery tank and a tunnel that we're able to shoot and recover those test specimens that I physically shot from the firearm. I'll compare those test specimens with each other to look at how those marks that I was looking for under the microscope that we were talking about, to see how they're reproducing on those test fires in whether that be a bullet or cartridge case. Compare
Yes.
that under the microscope and then compare that where necessary to the submitted evidence. After looking at all that, I reach a conclusion about whether this was fired by this item or not, or whatever that conclusion may be. I arrive at that and I write that conclusion down. At that point in time, another qualified examiner within our firearms department will review the evidence themselves. They'll look at all the submitted evidence and compare that with each other and with those test specimens that I fired and arrive at their own conclusion. If they're in agreement, then they'll sign off on my conclusions, and a report can be drafted. And that's how we get the information out to our customers through our report. At SLED, we have the 100% micro verification process where everything that we're issuing a conclusion on is reviewed by another examiner. So that case file, all that documentation that I generate goes to that examiner or reviewer. It undergoes a technical review and an administrative review before a report can be released. And in a nutshell, that's how we work each case. There are different parts, there's different items of evidence that we get in each case, but that's a quick overview of how each case has worked. And,
That's a quick overview.
That process was applied to this case.
The defense
Thank you, Mr.
has
Greer.
everything.
Speaking of the peer review process, that goes on in
Everything
the
that the
lab, is that
prosecution
conducted,
presents, the defense team
blindly,
has.
Meaning the person reviewing your
He said
report
in
doesn't
all of his
know what your
interviews, he touched
findings are?
Maggie.
That's correct.
Okay. Could you explain? So the subsequent reviewer doesn't know what you decided in your first prime opinion. Is that right?
Right. I'll look at the evidence myself, arrive at a conclusion, and the second examiner will look at it and come to their conclusion on their own. Once they have arrived at their own conclusion, looking at the evidence with their own eyes on the microscope, they'll read my results to see if they're in agreement with what I have determined or not.
And that, I think you just testified, but was that done in this case?
Yes, sir, it was.
Before we move on, please tell me what it means for a cartridge casing to be cycled through a weapon. What does that mean?
Sure. If you think back when we were looking at the cartridge earlier, an unfired cartridge, when we look at these items under magnification on the microscope, there are several different areas that we're going to be concerned with in looking at for those microscopic scratches and impressions, those little striations. One of those would be a firing pin, and that's what comes through the breech face of the gun to detonate the primer. Also the breech face marks on that primer from the gun. Ejector marks, that's what kicks that cartridge out of the gun or the cartridge case. Extractor marks, that's what pulls it out of the chamber of the firearm so that it can be kicked out. And also chamber marks, and that's on the body of the cartridge case, that cylindrical portion. So when we're looking at evidence, our ultimate goal is to say something was fired by this gun or they were fired by the same gun. And we do that, and we can rely on those firing pin marks and those breech face marks because that's what struck the primer and caused it to detonate and fire that cartridge. There's other things that we can look at just to single out like extractor marks and ejector marks.
The defendant should know everything his lawyer knows.
That we can look at to say
has a whole
that
file
the
he takes with
cartridge
him.
has traveled through a gun. For example, if you were to load a magazine, insert it into a semi-automatic firearm, pull the slide back, load that cartridge into the chamber, and then you decide you're not going to shoot or you need to remove that cartridge for any reason, you would pull back on that slide of the handgun and the cartridge would be extracted out of the chamber and ejected. Through that process, there can be marks left on the cartridge. That also would happen when you're firing it, but that's not what detonated that primer and set that off. Those ejector marks, those extractor marks, and that just means that that cartridge, we can say, has traveled through that firearm at one point in time. That's not to say it was fired by, but it's cycling marks that we're seeing as it cycled through that gun.
So is it accurate to say then that the cycling marks are separate and distinct from the actual firing pin marks that when you're reviewing these under a microscope?
Yes, sir. As far as what we're looking at geographically on the cartridge case, those would be in a different location when we're looking for those ejector marks or extractor marks or chamber marks. That's not something that we typically would be seeing on the primer area that detonated that cartridge.
Thank you. If I could, beginning with your results, if we could begin with your examination of all the shotgun shells, so the actual shells that were retrieved as part of your analysis, beginning with SLED items 9 and 10, which would be states item 33 and 34. Could you tell me where these items were retrieved? Remind us where these items were retrieved from, first of all.
This witness
SLED
testified.
items 9
at
and
an
10, that's
evidentiary
State's
hearing?
Exhibit 33 and 34.
He's not testified to the jury yet.
Item 9 was from marker 9, and item 10 was from marker 10, which is my understanding that it was at the feed or
We
storage.
know where
room.
those are.
And I'm going to put these on the Elmo, but if you would tell us what your
Put the map.
analysis.
Show them again where markers 9 and 10 are.
Yes, sir.
Demonstrative.
Objection to these opinions based on the prior ruling.
You've renewed your objection each time.
Yes, sir. When I compared and examined those two shot shells with each other, I determined that those two shot shells had been fired by the same firearm.
So the two shotgun shells.
Or the make and manufacture of those two weapons, projectiles or shells?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right.
SLED
Item
item 9. Yes, sir.
Which, item 9 is which item?
Item 9 is the red and color shot shell, which is State's Exhibit 34.
Okay.
That was a federal premium double-aught buck 3-inch Magnum shot shell. And SLED item 10 is the black and color shot shell, State's Exhibit 33, and that is a fired 12-gauge Winchester dry lock number 2 shot shell.
Oh. So the shotgun was loaded with two different types.
All right, Mr. Greer, moving
I'm slow.
on
Okay.
to,
Two different types of shot. The dry lock, which is why they made such a big deal out of Alec loading
referencing
the
item
shotgun with two
22
different types of
collectively.
ammo.
Yes, sir.
Okay. The red federal. What gauge was
State's
the red
Exhibit
federal? 12, right?
399, 22.7 on your report.
That was a 12 gauge.
Yes, sir.
I'm writing notes. I can't pet you. Give me a second. You're so demanding. Fred is staring at me like he hates me because I
State's
stopped
Exhibit
petting. I
399.
stopped petting with the
Did you have an
hand.
opportunity? Could you tell us what that is?
Yes, sir. That was the unfired 12-gauge shot shell that was submitted originally with the item 22 shotgun, which is the camouflage color Benelli shotgun.
Oh, all right. Did we compare it?
That package for us, please.
Yes, sir.
So we've got the red.
Do you have scissors or just?
He didn't roll into court with a knife in his pocket. Sorry, counsel. We have a red federal shotgun and then the black dry lock, both fired out of the weapon that killed Paul Murdaugh. The defense argued that Alec, when he loaded the Benelli, he loaded it with the 16 gauge and he loaded it with the 12 gauge because he was so out of his mind that he loaded them with the wrong ammo, or different ammo. But we're also seeing the shotgun that killed Paul.
Remind us again where that item was retrieved from.
This item was originally submitted with the item 22 camouflage
With
Benelli
two different
shotgun.
types of
that
ammo.
was submitted to the laboratory.
Meaning it was actually loaded into the shotgun?
When I received it, it was not loaded in the shotgun, but this was
It
an
had been.
unfired shot shell as it was submitted. This is the shot shell that I test fired in that shotgun.
All right, very good.
Do they match? Next, but do they match? Did the Benelli, wait, is the camo Benelli what they think is the shotgun? Counsel! We have questions.
Tell us, I'll put it on the Elmo. Tell us what the make and manufacture this item?
Yes, sir.
Wait, you test fired it, but
This is also a 12 gauge federal shot shell, and on the shot shell itself, it also says Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum.
Direct your attention back to state's item 34. Are those two items consistent with each other?
well, now I want to know.
Yes, sir. It does appear that they are consistent in construction and their head stamp information.
So the test fired round is consistent with the Benelli, which is consistent with the ones that killed Paul. I have questions because Fred's annoyed that I stopped petting him.
If you would, since
take notes.
let's work through the number of firearms that were identified by you. Did you have an opportunity to test those firearms with the projectiles retrieved?
Yes, sir, I did.
What were your results for item 30, the Mossberg pump action shotgun?
In regards to the two shot shells,
Correct.
my results after examining that, it was determined that the item 30 shotgun did not fire the items 9 and 10 shot shells.
And could you move on to item, your item 31, state's item, one moment, I'm sorry. And the item you just referenced was state's item 89, the Mossberg shotgun. State's exhibit 90, SLED item 31.
Now we're connecting the dots.
Please tell us about that item.
9 and 10 are
Yes,
the
sir.
shot
Based on my
shells that
examination,
killed Paul.
I was able to determine that item 31 was not fired by, that item 31 did not fire items 9 and 10.
All right, concerning state's exhibit 91, your SLED item 32,
Was it the
that would be a Benelli Super Black Eagle 2, black in color. Could you tell us your results of that?
Yes, sir. Based on my examination, it was determined that item 32 did not fire items 9 and 10.
Item 32 was, however, recovered with a number of rounds in it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
And what were those rounds?
Item 32, the Benelli model Super Black Eagle 2 shotgun, was submitted with 2 unfired 12 gauge shot shells, Federal and Winchester.
Winchester. Have we? But was it the Benelli?
All right, did you have an opportunity to compare the shot shells with item 22, the camouflage color Benelli Super Black Eagle 3?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right, if you
And?
would please tell us your findings concerning item 22.
Sure. When I compared SLED items 9 and 10
He has a different canter.
with those test shot shells that I fired through the item 22 camouflage shotgun, the results of those comparisons were inconclusive.
Why?
I was unable to determine whether or not items 9 and 10 were fired by item 22 or if they had been fired by another firearm with similar characteristics.
And were you able to eliminate item number 33 from this round of testing concerning the shotgun shells?
That's correct. The shotgun shells were not fired by the item 33 rifle.
So he's ruled out most of the guns, except for the one.
Moving on to your results, moving on to your testing, or did you conduct additional testing of 300 blackout rounds?
Yes, sir, I did.
So, a Benelli.
And of the cases of the ammunition, both fired, spent, so shell casings, or unfired ammunition, were the ones we examined today that were retrieved from the scene, what make and manufacturer were they of?
The cartridge cases were head stamped with the S&B logo and 300 blackout caliber.
Did you have an opportunity to test fire and examine SLED item 33, states exhibit 88? The 300 blackout rifle, black in color.
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. Could you please tell us your results from that examination for that weapon?
In regards to test firing the weapon?
Correct.
Yes, sir. When I examined item 33, I test fired it using the item 34 magazine. That was the magazine that was packaged alongside the rifle. During that test firing, the first available cartridge in the magazine, as I inserted the magazine into the firearm, it was fed and chambered into the rifle correctly and as I expected. The cartridge was successfully test fired, and then it extracted and ejected from the rifle again as I expected it to. However, as the firearm cycled, meaning when that bolt was coming back forward to load the next available cartridge in the magazine, it failed to feed that cartridge into the chamber, and I had to manually cycle it to load the next cartridge into the chamber. That issue did not prevent me from test firing the firearm, and no further analysis to determine that cause was conducted.
Referencing your results, SLED item 128 in your exam, were you able to identify any cartridge casings that would have been fired by item 33 rifle? Your item 33 states exhibit 90, states exhibit 88.
Yes, sir, I was.
And just to be clear, we're talking about this
The blackout
300 blackout rifle. Is that correct?
Well, no, the AR.
Your item 33?
The
Yes,
AR
sir, that
jams.
is SLED item 33 that I examined and test fired.
What were you able to identify with the rounds recovered, 300 blackout rounds recovered? Please list their item numbers as well.
Yes, sir. So I compared all the 300 blackout cartridges that I received, and based on my examinations and comparisons, I was able to determine that SLED item 38, 109, 110, 121, 126, and 127 were fired by the item 33 rifle.
And those would be various items that were recovered that we've been through and identified in the state's exhibits. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
So some of them you would say were fired by item 33.
That is correct.
I know you mentioned before with item 33, or sorry, state's exhibit 89. I'm sorry, state's exhibit 88. I know you'd mentioned before that it wasn't working properly. Does that inhibit your ability to test it in any way?
No, sir, I was able to test fire that firearm and recover those test specimens that I needed in order to make those comparisons.
Do malfunctions occur in firearms from time to time?
Yes, sir, they can occur.
But nevertheless, you were able to simulate you were able to fire the weapon eventually.
Yes, sir, I was able to test fire the weapon and recover those test specimens that I needed.
Other
All right, I'm going to
casings
reference
match to the
SLED
gun that
items
they
2 through
have.
7, 35 through 37, 39, 108, 111 through 120. Do you understand which items I'm referencing?
No.
Yes, sir, I do.
And how did you compare those, or how did the analysis go when compared with item 33, states item 88?
Yes, sir. When I compared those items, that was items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, 39, 108, 111 through 120, and 122 through 124, and 128 with each other. And when I compared those with those test specimens that I fired through item 33, the results of those comparisons were inconclusive. Again, that means I was unable to determine if they had been fired by item 33 or they had been fired by another firearm or firearms with similar characteristics.
Still on item 33, states exhibit 88, the recovered 300 blackout rifle. Were you able to compare the ejection and extraction marks of various 300 blackout rounds recovered and casings recovered?
Yes, sir.
And what was your findings concerning some of those items? And please list the items, and we will go back and identify states exhibits in a minute.
Yes, sir. In looking at the mechanism marks on items 111, 114 through 115.
I hope they've got a list up for the jury to look at.
119, 123, and 128, I was able to determine that those items had all been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the item 33 rifle at some previous time.
I promise I'll break it down. We're just not there yet.
I'm going to renew my objection to the next opinion that he's about to offer based on our prior
Oh,
rulings, just
good.
for the record.
We're at the important one.
Our arguments and understanding.
Thanks,
court's ruling.
Jim.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate
Greer,
it.
I'm going to
Appreciate
real
it,
quick
Jim.
reference
It's the important
on
opinion.
your chart, on your list, items marked SLED items 2 through 7, 35, 36, and 37, and SLED item 39. And that would be
Summary
states
chart.
exhibits
Summary chart. That's it. Summary chart.
63 through 68.
But I appreciate the heads up that this is important. Jim just reminded everybody to tune back in.
Just please verify that I've handed you states exhibits 63 through 68 and identify if they correlate to items 2 through 7 on your chart.
Items 2 through 7 are the casings that were found near Maggie Murdaugh's body from the shots that killed her. Those are items 2 through 7. So that's what they're talking about. Thanks, Jim.
Yes, sir. These states exhibits 63 through 68 are SLED items 2 through 7.
Those are the casings near Maggie's body.
And then I'm going to show you what's been marked as
Give me 1 sec. I'll show you those items 2 through 7 real quick. Let's see if I can get those up.
Take the court's indulgence.
Great. Thank you. Perfect timing,
States
counsel.
exhibit 260.
These are items 2 through 7 right here, in the sketch. This is the crime scene sketch that's in evidence. So you can see items 2 through 7 here near the hangar.
States exhibit 250,
Near
which
Maggie
correlates
Murdaugh.
to SLED items 35 through 39. Please verify that for me.
So those are 2 through 7. That's
Yes,
what
sir.
we're
This is
talking about.
States exhibit 260, which is a container that is to contain SLED items 35 through 39.
SLED items 2 through 7. States exhibit 63
Because
through 68.
how is the jury going to remember
After review of the crime scene,
what they are?
where were those located?
Good.
After reviewing the crime scene diagram, it's my understanding that those cartridge cases were at marker numbers that were near or around the body of Margaret Murdaugh.
Thank you, counsel.
And those would be 300 blackout rounds. Is that right?
That's correct. They're 300 blackout caliber.
You finally brought it back
They were
round.
spent casings.
Yes, sir. Those are fire cartridge cases.
And states exhibit 260, items 35 to 39. What are those again?
Those were all fire 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases, head stamped with the S&B logo and 300 blackout caliber.
And where were those
Collected
items
from where?
recovered?
Good.
Listed on our submission documents, those were from the ground at side entrance door.
The stoop.
Have you physically been there to the Moselle property?
Yes, sir, I have.
Are you familiar with the ground at the side entrance door?
Yes, sir, I believe so.
This is the most important part
Is
that
the
he's
side
tying
entrance
together.
that leads to the pool table and the gun room?
Based on my understanding of the scene, yes, sir, I believe that is where those were collected from, near that door that goes into that room.
We have 300 blackout round casings collected from around Maggie's body, and we have 300 casings collected from the house. Is that correct?
Good.
That's
now
correct.
it's clear.
And do you have any notes? Did you take any contemporaneous notes on the condition of your items 35 to 39, those collected at the side of the house?
And we saw the
yes,
video.
sir, I do believe so. I'm going to reference
The Captain
my
America
case file
video
here to confirm.
is
Would
the
referencing your file
video.
help you refresh your memory on that matter?
Yes, sir, it would.
The Captain America video that we watched together is where
During
those
my
were collected.
examination, when I looked at items 35 through 39, which were recovered near that door area, I did note that they were tarnished and weathered in my case file.
Mr. Greer, tell us what you found concerning those items.
Based on my examination, it was determined that items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, and 39 had matching mechanism marks, and it was concluded that those items had been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
So if I understand it correctly, the items collected right by Maggie
Good.
had been
Tie it
extracted,
together.
loaded into, extracted to, and ejected by the same firearm that identified that items were picked up by the side of the house.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Thank you. So what he just testified to was that the casings at the side of the house and the casings at Maggie's body were
Additional
fired
items were
from the
collected
same
as
gun.
well. And did you have an opportunity to analyze those
Yes, sir, I did.
and identify the SLED item numbers, and then we'll identify the state's exhibit numbers?
Those were SLED items number 108, 113, 116, 117, and 122.
So
Handing you what's been marked
I
as state's exhibit
I truly think that
261.
the defense highlighted the importance of that question by renewing their objection right before it made everybody sit up and pay
Various,
attention.
Items, and what are they again?
Yes, sir. This is a container that contains multiple 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases and fired 12 gauge shot shells.
And in that in that collective bin include 300 blackout rounds of the items you just listed?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
All right, tell us what your findings were for those items. And where were these collected?
Based on the submission documentation, those were collected from areas such as from to the left of a shooting chair near field, from a right corner near field, from in front of a shooter's chair under a table.
These are from the gun range, from the shoot shed.
Would you like me to identify each location?
For those items, have you had an opportunity to review some body worn camera
I guess
footage and
that's a no.
evidence and kind of identify what that actually meant?
Oh, yes, sir.
What and generally when it says left leg and right leg and near the front or back, what is it talking about?
It appears that there's some type of shooting area that those were collected from.
What were your findings concerning those items?
It was determined that those items, and to include items 108, 113, 116, 117, and 122, also had those same matching mechanism marks to conclude that they had been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm as those at the crime scene around Margaret Murdaugh's body, and those several recovered from the home.
So the items collected around Margaret Murdaugh's body matched the items collected outside the house, which matched items that were collected in the field at the shooting range.
Yes, sir. I was able to identify that the cartridge cases recovered items 2 through 7 near the body did
Okay,
have matching mechanism marks
That's
with
a really
several of the
interesting
items from the area around
Okay,
the home
McKay.
and
It's a
those
very
in the
interesting
shooting
point.
field, and several of those in the shooting field, to conclude that some of those have been, that those have been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
Okay, so the ammo at the shooting shed, the gun range, the ammo next to the door where Will testified they were sighting in, and the gun that killed Maggie Murdaugh are all the same gun. That gun
reference
is
slide item 8.
not the gun that the police
the
have in
state's
custody.
item-
It's similar to the gun they have in custody,
250.
but not the same.
State's exhibit 250.
It's the missing one.
I'm going to put it on the screen.
So this ties it to the missing gun. Does that put the gun
What
in
is
Alex's
that
hand?
item again? Remind us, please.
No. But is that
SLED item 8
circumstantial?
was
Yes.
one fired bullet, determined to be 300 blackout caliber, listed as near tire impression at marker 8.
Recovered from the scene.
Yes, sir, at marker 8.
Is that a fire projectile?
Yes, sir, that is a fired bullet.
Is that, how much does that bullet weigh?
According to my notes, when I weighed that projectile, it weighed approximately 147.4 grains.
Handing you what's marked as Exhibit 213.
So they
Remind us
matched
again what
the
that is.
ammo. The gun is missing. They can't match it to a gun. They said it's
States
similar
Exhibit 213
to the other
appears to
blackout,
be
but not
an
the same.
ammunition box marked cellular and below and 300 blackout caliber.
What are the grains indicated on that box?
On the side of this box, it has information about the projectile, and it says 147 grains on the side.
Is State's Exhibit up on the Elmo, is that consistent with a 147 grain projectile?
Yes, sir. That bullet appears to be intact, and based on my examination and looking at these fired bullets as a part of an examination, I would say that would be consistent with being 147 grains.
So the same thing happened with the shotgun shells. The 2 shotgun shells near Paul were fired by the same gun, which was like the Benelli camo.
Did you
But Will testified there were 2
inspect sled
Benellis,
item 12?
and they had different camo patterns.
Yes, sir, I did.
Tell us your results of that.
Sled item 12
So there's a missing
was
shotgun.
one fired bullet, determined to also be 300, most consistent with being 300 blackout caliber. And it was listed as from bedding inside doghouse.
And did you have an opportunity to weigh that projectile?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what was the results of that?
When I weighed that projectile, it was approximately 146.8 grains.
None of the guns in court are the murder weapons.
147 grain
Correct.
unfired ammunition?
Yes, sir, I would say that would be consistent with 147 grains.
So what we have heard today that's interesting is that this witness swabbed what is probably blood from the shotgun that Alec had when the police arrived. We heard from other witnesses allusions to the fact that they also swabbed DNA. We have not seen the people that tested and matched the DNA yet, but it goes 2 ways. Alec said he touched Maggie, and so if he transferred her DNA to the gun that he picked up, why was he clean? Why was the rest of the gun clean?
As state and entered into evidence of State's Exhibit 143, 144, 148, and 150. Could you please remove those collectively and let me know if you are familiar with the
I got
make and
questions.
manufacture of those items?
We will hear more about what was tested. I'm saying presumably blood because they haven't said that. They've said reddish brown. That's consistent. They're going to swab it. They're going to test it. We just don't have that witness yet. We don't have that witness yet. So in total, there are 3 missing guns. One was missing like in 2017 that's kind of accounted for.
State's Exhibit
And then the 2 murder
143
weapons.
is a 12 gauge federal shot shell. It says Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum on the shell, on the side of the shell. State's Exhibit 144 is also a 12 gauge federal shot shell. On the side of it, it says Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum.
So this has raised more
State's
questions.
Exhibit 148 is also a 12 gauge federal shot shell. On the side of it, it says Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum.
If I was going through this, I think I would have gone to they matched the murder weapon,
and
or
State's Exhibit 150
they all came
is
from the same
also a
weapon
12 gauge
last.
federal shot shell.
I would have done that
with the
last.
same information of Federal Premium Double Aught Buck 3-inch Magnum.
Are all of those 4 exhibits that you just reviewed of the same manufacturer and same make and model?
Yes, sir. They appear to have the same information and also in their in their construction as well.
If I use one for demonstrative purposes, all the rest are the same?
Yes, sir. They appear to be all consistent.
Showing you what you just identified. This would be States 143. Is this the item you just looked at, Mr. Greer?
Yes, sir.
Showing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 34. Remind me again which item that is.
Remind all of
What
us.
item? 9.
State's Exhibit 34 was SLED item 9. That's correct.
What's the make and model of that?
SLED item 9, State's Exhibit 34 was a fired 12-gauge shot shell
That's
with the Federal
that killed
Premium
Paul.
double-aught buck 3-inch Magnum, red in color.
So we're
Showing
gonna,
you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 399.
okay, are we going to tie these
This would
together?
be,
Is that 10?
yeah, where's item 9 from?
Item 9 is listed as from marker 9. And again, based on my understanding of the crime scene document, that was near or around the speed room.
And
All right.
marked as State's Exhibit 399.
We'll go back to the
Slide
courtroom
item
in a second.
22.7.
This is
Where's that
Paul,
item from?
and this is 9 and 10.
SLED item 22.7, State's Exhibit 399, was the unfired
So
12-gauge
9 and
shot
10.
shell that was originally submitted as item 22 with the camouflage Benelli shotgun.
State's item 4, and you've already reviewed this. Exhibit 4 for the state, 22 for you. Is that the same shotgun that you're referring to?
He is checking the weapon again for safety each time they hand it to him.
Yes, sir. This is my item 22 shotgun.
Camouflage Benelli Super Black Eagle 3. Is that right?
There's so many. Why does
Yes,
that
sir,
gun have
that's
so many
correct.
names?
And all those items are of the same model and manufacturer. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. They all appear to have the same head stamp information and information on the side of the shell, and their case construction all appears to be consistent.
Did you test fire them?
Reference your item 10 now. Well, first, let me collectively hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibits 144. Sorry. State's Exhibits 145, 146, 147, and 149 collectively. Please take them out individually, review them. Let me know if you recall what they are. Make and manufacture.
Wait, can we close the loop with the Benelli? What happened when he test fired the Benelli? I still don't understand. Can we just circle back? What happened when we test fired the Benelli? Did you ask? Did we miss it?
State's Exhibit
I'm very
145.
tired.
It's head stamp Winchester 12 gauge with dry lock 3-inch and a 2 on the shell. State's Exhibit 146 is head stamp Winchester 12 gauge. On the shell, it says dry lock 3-inch number 2. State's Exhibit 147 is head stamp Winchester 12 gauge.
He
On the
did.
shell, dry
he's-
lock 3-inch number 2.
I remember him saying inconclusive earlier, but then counsel circled back around to this, and I don't know
In State's
why he
Exhibit
circled back
149,
around and grabbed the gun and then didn't circle it back.
head stamp Winchester 12 gauge.
And I'm trying to
On
follow.
the shell, dry lock 3-inch number 2.
And he had just circled back with Maggie, so I'm just.
Okay, where those items were recovered.
Based on the packaging.
Where does the packaging indicate those items?
Why are we not circling back?
The packaging for State's Exhibit 145 says from a state box on bookshelf in gun room.
Didn't we already do this?
State's Exhibit 146 says from Kent box on bookshelf in gun room.
Oh no, those were in the
State's Exhibit 147
the ones
says
earlier were in the work
from
workroom.
nightstand in Paul's room. And State's Exhibit 149 says from a state box on bookshelf in gun room.
So these are the dry lock ammo that we've heard about 100 times.
and hand you what's been marked and identified as State's Exhibit 33, slide item 10. Where was that located?
10 is by Paul.
Sled item 10.
9 is by Paul.
Again, was a fired 12 gauge shot shell, head stamp Winchester 12 gauge. On the side, dry lock 3-inch number 2.
Oh, that's why.
And that
okay.
was located at marker 10, which again, based on my understanding, was near that feed room.
They're matching the ammo. Is
Identify,
this
please,
ammo
the make and
this ammo?
manufacturer of that item.
That's why.
Yes, sir. It was head stamp Winchester 12 gauge. And on the shell, it says dry lock 3-inch 2.
I understand now.
Consistent with the make and manufacture of all the other items you just reviewed?
Yes, sir, it is.
Same ammo. So they're connecting the ammo used to the ammo found in the house. Good. All right. The ammo that killed Paul was also found other places on the property. I feel like we knew this already. And so I was trying to see if there was more.
Those
There's
all the
not.
items you just reviewed, Mr. Greer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Family ammo,
No
family
further
guns.
questions from the state.
Okay. Family ammo, family guns. That's where we're at. That's where we're at. Family ammo, family guns.
We'll take a few minutes break. Ladies and gentlemen, do not discuss the case.
Okay. Okay. The court's like, the court is done. Nobody asked for a break. And I think the court was like, I'm over it. We're taking a break. Good. Go ahead and start. Fred, hi, buddy. What's up? We're okay. We're gonna take a break. We're gonna go back to this crime scene photo. Fred, buddy, I need my hands for the moment. Don't eat my cheese. Okay. Let's go to the crime scene map. All right, here's our crime scene map. Here's our crime scene map. So, 9 and 10. 9 and 10. 2 different types of ammunition. Those are the ammunition shotgun shells that were used to shoot Paul Murdaugh. 9 and 10 have been matched to other ammo found elsewhere on the property. Each kind was matched elsewhere. The buckshot and the birdshot. Both were matched elsewhere. So 9 and 10 are shot shells that match ammo on the property. Okay. 9 and 10 were fired, he thinks, from a gun similar to the Benelli. That's what I took away from earlier. Not that Benelli, but similar. We know that there were multiple camouflage shotguns from either Rogan or Will, because they talked about the fact that they had multiples and they had different types of camo on the weapons, but only one camo weapon was recovered. What we learned about the recovered camo weapon, that was the weapon that Alec went down to the house and told police that he got after he went up and checked Maggie's pulse and tried to flip Paul over. I tried to flip Paul over. I tried to check Maggie's pulse. I went down that house. I got a gun. I came back up. I called 911. Police arrived. And we now know that there is some type of brownish reddish spot that was swabbed on that gun. I say presumed to be blood because we've heard about DNA swabs on the gun, and we've now heard about what I presume to be blood. But the gun didn't appear to have any blood on it. This was like inside the workings of the gun. Could this be tested to be deer blood or boar blood or whatever else? Yes. Would they have brought it up? Maybe not. So I'm interested to see whose DNA that is, because if Alec is clean, would he have had enough blood on him to transfer the blood of Maggie or Paul onto that gun and have the rest of the gun not covered in blood? I don't know. So it'll be interesting to see when they tie it back. At the end, I've been critical of all of the prosecutors, but at the end, he finally tied back. Okay, remember, 9 and 10 were near Paul, 2 through 7 near Maggie, and then started to tie it up at the end. Thank you. So we have not seen the DNA expert yet who tested the DNA together. We have not seen anyone who's tested blood. We've heard about a lot of fucking swabs. They've swabbed everything. We've heard of all of the swabs. But until the swabs come in, they can't testify about the DNA because it's like, where did you get the swab from? So We have to have the swab from somewhere. So we've laid the foundation with the swabs. Hopefully we'll get to the DNA testimony soon. And then what we learned is that the shell casings near Maggie, the shell casings that Will testified to about sighting in the red dot, not the thermo, the cheaper of the AR blackouts, those casings from the side of the gun room, from the shoot shed firing range on the property, and from Maggie's body all matched. And that those were shot from a gun similar to the Thermoscope 300 blackout, but not from that gun. So that's where we're at. Paul was shot with a shotgun. Maggie was shot with a rifle. It's a lot of testimony to get to that bit of information. And it took a long time to get there. The ammo that shot Paul is the same ammo the family owns and has other places on the residence, including one on his nightstand at Moselle. The ammo that killed Maggie is the same ammo that is elsewhere. It's not ringing. There's vacuuming happening in my house. So that's vacuum noises. So it's just, there's vacuum noises. So they don't have the murder weapons. Those two guns are missing. But they have similar guns on the property, and we know that the family had multiples of the type of guns that they're similar to. They are going to argue family guns, especially for the 300 blackout. That is a family gun. It's been shot on the property multiple times. Will testified to it. Family gun, family ammo. No other evidence of anyone else on the property. But also the timing really is weird. And there's a lot of questions. And he has no blood. So he has no blood on him. He has no blood on him. Yes, I do. My husband is home. All right. Let us keep going. This witness clearly loves his job. I agree. Someone call Runkelstat. I feel like you guys summoned Runkle. I can't wait for his breakdown of this testimony. Why is the jury not allowed to take notes? It's a regional determination. It goes judge by judge. The judge doesn't want them to take notes. Here's the thing about the jury not taking notes. The prosecution knows this, and it is their job to make it easier for the jury. Oh, I forgot. Yes. Emily Phillips over on Facebook. Thank you. We also have Alec Murdaugh in different clothes than he was in the Snapchat earlier in the night. Completely different clothes. Earlier in the night, we have him in a blue short sleeve shirt, long khaki or long like dress pant style pants, and like a leather office work shoe. Not like a work boot, but like an office work shoe from earlier. So that. So interesting. Also, you have very close timing from when we know Alec is at the kennels and then heading towards the house. It's within like 3 minutes. It seems like it's about a 2-minute walk between the kennels and the house. So how do you get back to the house and not notice someone else on the property driving in with lights or any of it? It's just wild stuff. So we're not done with the evidence yet. Questions have been raised. Answers have not all been given except for these answers. And these are things that we heard earlier. I'm going to get to some more questions and then we will just like, let's see. Somebody said it's not allowed to take notes in California. In Los Angeles, it is. In Los Angeles, they are absolutely allowed to take notes. All of my jury trials in Los Angeles County took notes. It varies regionally. So all of my jurors took notes. And they had like overhead swoop notebooks. And then the notebooks were collected at the end of the day. I've just pissed off my own camera. And the notebooks were collected at the end of the day. They couldn't take them home. But my camera is angry about something. All right. Well, let's keep going. Look, I'm just channeling my inner Peter Mon, folks. Sometimes it has to happen. Sometimes it has to happen. Question, does this mean that the victims were killed by Paul's guns? I think it means that the victims were killed by family guns. Yes. So yes, whoever the Benellis was, but we know the 300 AR blackout was Paul's replacement gun and Maggie was killed with that gun. Blood, assuming he doesn't clean his guns. I'm not assuming that Alec doesn't clean his guns. Somehow blood got on the gun and the rest of the gun looked clean, but guns have a lot of working parts. So that could be tucked away in there, or he transferred it, or it's older. But Maggie doesn't like to hunt. So I don't think it's because she's hunting. But yes, the guns were communal. It's just, look, this is what a circumstantial case is. Alex said he wasn't at the kennels, but now we know he's at the kennels. He said he didn't like change his clothes or clean up or anything, but he's completely spotless, doesn't have any blood on him. But we now see him earlier in a button-down shirt and pants and work shoes. Could the white shirt have been an undershirt? And then he put on shorts? I don't know. Could be. But now you're starting to have the inconsistencies stack up, and that's how you build a circumstantial case. And then they weren't killed with weapons that weren't familiar to this property, it didn't seem. At least when it comes to the AR, the shotgun, not so much. But rounds that were on the property. You wouldn't show up if you're targeting this family. You don't show up hoping to get a hold of one of those weapons, I would think. It seems that it wouldn't make any sense at all to show up to this location where people are, armed to try to do them harm and not be planned with your own weapons unless you were invited to do so, or unless you were already on the property, or unless you're a family member. But that's where it breaks down, doesn't it? Because some of you are still going, yeah, but did he pull the trigger? Was he there when somebody else did? It's still unclear because it's still unclear. And we haven't gotten to all of the alibi witnesses. Will you come on to FNF tonight? Should be fun. I am exhausted, so I have to see what my kids are doing. We've got kiddo stuff tonight and tomorrow. And I've got to start getting ready for a trip. So I will see. Identical. They were identical. Why present all the shotguns that don't match? There's no missing shotguns from the property, right? There is maybe a missing shotgun from the property. It's still kind of unclear to me. I would need to go back and look at all the testimony because some things stick out in my brain much more than others. But why take them all? Because if they didn't take them all, the defense would say, they didn't even test the weapons. We don't know. So they had to. They had to. This witness has clearly done their job. I see you. And that's the timing on that's tough too, because it's right within moments of that Snapchat video. Question, please. What are the chances of this was a botched walls closing in? Tried. I don't know. I don't know. It's possible. It's possible. As a juror, I'd be so confused. I enjoyed the last witness, but I can't help to feel we still don't get anywhere that ties him to the guns. He has access to them. And that's what they're going to argue, especially because it's circumstantial. Who else has access like this? But then again, it seems that all the friends had access and everybody was on and off the property. So we're just, I think it's fair that we're just not there yet. And it's fair to be not there yet. All the dry lock ammunition was found in September's search. One of the shells was dry lock. I think they just pulled out multiple dry lock shells at the end there. Yes, they were found in September. They did not do a very thorough search before September. And that leads the defense to say, why wouldn't he just get rid of it? Why wouldn't he just clear it out? It's a fair argument. And then we've got the inconsistencies on the phone. I talk about this in Quick Bits today. There are only 2 calls in the phone log for Alex's phone on the day of June 7th, but Verizon shows 73. The prosecution says he's trying to manufacture an alibi. Well, if you're manufacturing an alibi, why delete the phone calls? If you're grieving, I can see why you delete the phone calls, because you don't want to be reminded maybe that you were calling and frantically searching for your family. Well, you now know that they were being murdered. So we've got some questions
Bring the jury.
that aren't answered. Hold on, bring the jury. Maybe. Oh no, that doesn't work. I think it has to be applause when we bring the jury. Thank you, Your Honor. I might need fanfare trumpets for bring the jury. So there's a lot of questions here. And the thing is, all of this evidence can be argued both ways. All of this evidence can be argued both ways. 73 phone calls on Verizon, 2 on his phone. 2 on his phone the next day. But if it's a manufactured alibi, why delete it? Why not leave it? If you're manufacturing it so carefully, why delete them? There are questions, lots of them. The police saw the phone calls during the first interview. A few of them, quickly, he did. but the download of the phone the next day, they were gone. It's odd. There's a lot of odd things in this case, but odd doesn't get you to guilty. Odd gets you to, I got a lot of fucking questions. And you know what questions are? Questions are doubt. Questions are doubt. And that's hard. What about the burner phone? We don't have a burner phone. Why are calls missing from his cell record? They're not. They're missing from his phone, from the phone that you can delete.
Sir, cross-examination.
Verizon has them. The phone doesn't have them. All right. I've never been more thankful for Jim Griffin. We're going to switch feeds real quick now that we're getting into cross-examination and this is back.
Good afternoon.
Because we've got at least some
Just one.
proximity to closed captioning.
We can agree on one thing, and that is you're not here to tell this jury that any of the weapons
Objection,
in
no
this
question.
room were used, in your opinion, to murder Maggie or Paul, correct?
Based on my examination
Thanks for being clear, Jim.
the evidence, was able to identify that there were matching mechanism marks in items around, as mentioned, the body of Maggie Murdaugh and other areas of the property. And in regards to the two shot shells in comparison with those shotguns, items 9 and 10 were inconclusive with the item 22 shotgun.
Look how clear that was. Thanks, Jim.
So that means you cannot,
Cheers.
and you did not, and you are not offering an opinion that item 22 shotgun was used to murder Paul Murdaugh, correct?
My
Not saying
result was inconclusive. And what that ultimately means is I'm not able to determine that. It's a possibility that it could have been fired by that shotgun, and it also could have been another firearm with similar characteristics.
Meaning it's
Possible.
just equally possible it wasn't that gun.
That's possible.
Possible it was, possible it wasn't.
And this 300 blackout. We know a 300 blackout was used to murder Maggie Murdaugh.
Jim,
correct?
thanks for making it clear, man.
Based on the evidence that I received, I did have several projectiles that were 300 blackout caliber that were most consistent with that, as well as several cartridge cases that were head stamped that caliber.
And you're not here to tell this jury, in your opinion, that this 300 blackouts laying on the floor here was used to murder Maggie Murdaugh, correct?
The results of the comparisons of those cartridge cases, items 2 through 7,
Are
with
inconclusive.
test fires from that item 33 rifle were also inconclusive. Meaning it's, I was unable to determine if those cartridge cases were fired by item 33 or they've been fired by another firearm.
Fair.
How many cartridges were found at the murder scene of 300 blackouts? Do you remember?
Based on my understanding of the crime scene, I believe I was only submitted items 2 through 7. So that would be 6 fired 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases. And again, I was not at the scene to recover those. That's just what was submitted to me and based on my understanding of the evidence.
Okay. I want to stay on the 300 blackout for a moment. I'm going to show you what we marked as Defendant's Exhibit 69.
Previously commented on that.
Excuse me?
Just what I previously.
Yeah. And you had your file there, but take a look at Defendant 69 and see, tell us if you recognize that document as coming from your firearms file report, excuse me, extended report.
Yes, sir. This state's exhibit,
Defendant's exhibit.
excuse me, yes, sir. Defendant's Exhibit 69 does appear to be a copy of 2 pages from my case file.
Thank you. Your Honor, we would move defendant's exhibit 69 in the evidence, I believe without objection.
Without objection.
Submitted.
Yeah. This is page number 67 and 68. We're going to pull it up on the screen. And while we're doing that, Agent Greer, is this your worksheet for the 300 blackout that's here in the courtroom and SLED item 33, which bears State's exhibit number 88?
Yes, sir. That would be a copy of my worksheet for SLED item 33.
Okay. And this is the item that you're not prepared to tell the jury here that, in your opinion, was not used to murder Maggie Murdaugh.
Based on my examination of the cartridge cases, or several of those cartridge cases that were recovered from all the locations, the results of those comparisons were inconclusive. I'm unable to determine if they were fired by that firearm or by another firearm or firearms with those similar characteristics.
But you did test fire this item 33, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
And on the second page of exhibit 69, Doug, if you'll pull up the description of what happened, and if you'll tell the jury what problems you encountered when you test fired item 33, which is State's exhibit 88.
Okay. I'm actually kind of curious
Yes, sir.
too.
During the test firing, I loaded the magazine with cartridges. That was SLED item 34. And I inserted that into the magazine well of the SLED item
I don't know
33,
if
the
this
rifle.
helps the defense that the other gun wasn't working.
I chambered the first available cartridge into the firearm and fired it. That went as expected. The cartridge was fired. It extracted and ejected from that firearm properly. However, as that bolt was going back forward, I would have expected it to pick up the next available cartridge from the magazine. However, it didn't. And I had to manually cycle that bolt again to load the next available cartridge from the magazine. That issue did not prevent me from test firing it, and I was able to collect those test specimens that I needed. And no further analysis to determine the cause of that was conducted.
So when you say you had to manually, it says as a firearm cycle, the next available cartridge in the magazine failed to feed in the chamber. So then you had to manually do it. How do you manually do it?
Yes, sir. On the top of the firearm, there's a charging handle. I had to pull back on that charging handle, which in turn pulls that bolt backwards. And when I did that and released it, it was able to then go forward on its own and pick up the next cartridge from that magazine that was inserted into the firearm.
And you had to do that every time you fired exhibit 88, is that correct?
Yes, sir, I believe so. During my test firing, I did have that phenomenon occur.
So is it fair to say exhibit 88, item 33 was malfunctioning when you tested it?
It did not work as I expected it to. I would have expected it to fire
But is that
and load that next
malfunctioning?
cartridge as it should. However, when we're test firing these firearms, we're holding them in different ways because we're test firing them in a bullet recovery tank, which at the time was a vertical tank filled with water. So I had to hold it in kind of a strange position. But through all my test firing, I did have this situation occur. But again, no other testing to determine why that was happening was conducted. And I was able to test fire that gun and collect those test specimens.
And
Okay.
is it fair to say you were not able to rapid fire, pull the trigger,
Would they even
pull the
try
trigger,
that?
and shoot
Is that part of test
bullets
firing?
in immediate
Why would they do
succession?
that?
During my testing, I had to manually load that next cartridge in. So it just took the amount of time that it would take me to do that step, if you will.
So
Instead of
also
the firearm
no.
performing that function for me, I had to do it. And that's what I did in this case.
So also no.
Okay, and then,
So also no.
all right, were you able to get the projectile out of the water tank and compare it to the 2 projectiles found at the murder scene, I believe. I don't know if it's item 8 or as part of your analysis, did you compare projectiles from item 33 to the projectiles found at the scene?
Yes, sir, that is correct. I did collect those test fired bullets from our water tank, and I did compare that where appropriate with the fired projectiles that were submitted.
And did you reach any conclusions based upon that projectile comparison?
Yes, sir, I did.
And what were those conclusions?
Based on the observable physical characteristics of items 8 and 12, those are SLED items 8 and 12, I determined those to be most consistent with 300 blackout caliber. Item 8 may be suitable for identification with other evidence, and item 12 sustained damage, and it was unsuitable for identification with other evidence. That means that due to the damage that it had sustained, there were no identifying features that I saw under the microscope that I would use for identification purposes. I also received several other projectiles and fragments that I compared to the item 33 rifle. Due to damage in their size, the calibers items 11, 66, and 137 could not be determined. They were just too small for me to make any determination about their caliber. Due to damage and the limited marks of value that I saw on item 11, specifically the fired bullet jacket fragment and the item 66 fired bullet jacket fragments, I was concluded that those may or may not be suitable for identification and compared those later on to the rifle. Based on that, no marks of value that were displayed on the item 11 bullet jacket fragments.
The gun he's talking about is not the gun that was used.
I determined those were unsuitable. So again, due to there being no marks of value for me to compare, I was unable to compare those with those test bullets. Item 137 bore some type of strided marking. However, I was unable to determine the origin of those marks and use those for an identification purposes. And it was determined that it was also unsuitable. Lastly, the 3 items that I did compare with those test specimens that fired from those rifle, which were item 8, the item 11 fired bullet jacket fragment, and the item 66 fired bullet jacket fragments, the results of those comparisons were also inconclusive with each other and with those test specimens. And that was just due to damage and just insufficient markings for us to base our opinion on. It could not be determined whether those items were fired by item 33 or by another firearm or firearms with similar characteristics.
So the GO 250 is the projectile.
We're going to get a summary from Jim. Okay.
That was found by marker 8, I believe. Just confirm that one, please.
It's not helpful to the prosecution when cross-examination makes things more clear, but let me know what you think. Is this making it more clear? Is this more clear?
Yes, sir, that is correct. State's Exhibit 250 was SLED item 8, near tire impression at marker 8. That's correct.
And I believe you just, as you're reading from your report, told the jury that you couldn't make any conclusions about the projectile seized at the scene from the projectiles fired in a water tank from this 300 blackout laying on the floor here. Is that right?
I see the chat saying hi to Natalie and Runkle. Hello, Natalie and
I'm unable
Runkle.
to determine if item 8 was fired by the rifle or by another firearm with similar rifling characteristics.
Well, aren't the rifling marks on a projectile as it goes through the barrel more reliable when making firearm identifications than most any other tool marks that you rely upon?
It's good questioning.
I wouldn't say they're more reliable. We do rely on the rifling in that barrel to mark those projectiles, and that's what gives those markings on puts those markings on those bullets. So we're able to look at them and do a firearms identification examination on them. Tools, firearms, all mark evidence. Again, I was unable to do that in this case, and my results were inconclusive. I mean, that's due to the damage that these may have sustained and to just insufficient markings that were on the bullet when I looked at it. There was not enough of those markings on there for me to determine if they were fired by item 33.
But item 8, exhibit 250 there. Do you recall whether there was human organic matter on that projectile when it was recovered?
Let me refer to my notes. I don't have documented in my notes that there was any foreign material or trace on it as I received it.
But
As he
we know
received it.
that that projectile was recovered at the murder scene at marker 8. Is that right? Near the top.
Yes, sir. Near the tire impression at marker 8.
That's
That's correct.
a little condescending.
And you made comparisons of of
Did you hear him
shell
go near the top?
cartridges,
Let this
the back
witness
end of
do his job.
the full bullet that were collected at the shooting house on the property at Moselle. Did you not? I don't have the numbers, but we went through them a moment ago. You did.
Was there a question? This witness's face says, was there a question? Look at his face.
You remember?
Is there a question?
Let me ask you to take a look at
Jim,
the projectiles that were found. I believe they're items, they are items 108 through 125. I'm not sure what their state exhibit numbers are, but if you look at 108
Uncle,
through
you get
125 in
to.
your report, those are
prosecutors rarely get to be
spent-
condescending.
300 blackout caliber cartridge cases.
He
SLED
to
items
be
108 through
condescending.
125
I just
was
like this
determined
witness.
all to be fired 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases.
And in your report, it references left of shooting chair near field, right front corner, et cetera. Maybe you don't know, but or are you aware those were collected at a
Maybe you don't
gun
know.
house at a firing range on the property?
Yes, sir. And I'm going to back up. I misspoke earlier. It's 108 through 124 are the 300 blackout caliber cartridge cases. But based on my understanding of everything, yeah, there was some type of shooting field or stand that I believe those were collected from, and that kind of seems to coincide with the item descriptions, which is what I'm familiar with.
Okay, and were you aware that when you're sitting in the shooting house and
Were
you're
you aware or good questions?
target practicing that there was a earthen berm that the shots were fired into?
No, sir. I've never seen this area.
Okay. Would it have been helpful to your analysis if investigators had dug out
Jim, it
items
would have been
from that
helpful if the
earthen berm
investigators searched the
the
actual
projectiles,
house.
such as what's sitting in front of you as State's Exhibit 250?
Sure would have been.
We're able to look at bullets
I
that
like
are
how he
submitted. We don't have
he
any type
bridges
of
his
restraint.
answer.
It may have been helpful. Bullets, as we've seen here, come to
I
us
like
in
this
all
witness and
shapes
how he-
and
how he bridges
sizes
his
due to
answer
the
to, I don't
damage
really
that
need
they may have sustained. So I'm unable to really answer that question without seeing the evidence and determining if it would be helpful.
He's like, I don't know if it would be
Okay.
helpful. I don't know what it is. I don't know what we got. I don't know what
I
they
want to
got.
ask
down there.
you a little more about the conclusions that you reached as documented in your report, and I've particularly focused on item 128, and I'm still talking about the Buster 300 blackout that's laying on the floor here in the courtroom. And just so we're clear,
He said
there were
earthen berm, like
items,
a mound of dirt.
the
Earthen
cartridges
berm,
that we talked about, the back end of the bullet,
dirt
that
mound.
you were able to conclude that they were fired by this gun, right?
Yes, sir. I was able to determine in looking at the totality of the marks on those cartridge cases that there were items submitted to me have been fired by that firearm.
And your conclusion that they've been fired by this gun, and we're talking about the cartridges. One is cartridge 38, which is up by the residence, correct?
Yes,
Like-
sir. SLED item 38, that's my understanding. And it was submitted as being recovered from near a door.
Well, and that's the door that you testified that you saw when you went on the property.
Yes, sir, I believe so. That's my understanding.
That's what he said.
And so it's been a long week,
Yep.
2 weeks, but
Fair.
the SLED agent early in the case who had body cams going around picking up spent shell cartridges adjacent to that door, and you believe this is one of those, correct?
That's my understanding that those items came from the area outside that gunroom door.
And you concluded that item 38, along with some other items found at the shooting house, which would be, these 109 and 110, you concluded. Where are 109 and 110 found? Yeah, that's the shooting range, correct?
Jim, what is the question?
Yes, sir. As submitted to the lab, item 109 was collected from right front corner near field, and item 110 was in front of shooter's chair under table near field.
Okay. And so one spent cartridge found next to the door up at the house, main residence at Moselle, and then you've got
Jim's job is to attack the science and the conclusions and that it's not enough. And how can you really say
the
that?
shooting range that you say, in your opinion,
That's what it is.
were fired by this gun.
Yes, sir. That is my opinion.
But then you've also
I want him to go Tamara.
matched
It's like my opinion.
other cartridges.
It's never going to
When
happen.
you report items 111, 114, 115,
I would be
18,
amused.
19, 123. And it says 128 in your report
Leo, the defense is allowed to ask.
that
The
You
defense
say
is allowed to
were
ask open-ended questions. They don't have to
loaded
just ask
into,
leading.
extracted, and ejected from
They're trying to muddy the water,
this rifle.
which is fair.
That's correct.
But you don't say they were fired from this rifle.
So they don't
That's
have to.
correct.
But they were spent shell casings found at the shooting range, correct?
That's correct.
Yes, sir. And those were fired cartridge cases in it, and it's just plain term. They had been fired. When I'm looking at the totality of all these markings, again, we go back to those 5 areas that we're really going
I
to
love
look
that he's
at.
like, let me
The marks
explain.
that I saw that were in agreement, that I made that conclusion and based my opinion on, were those ejector or lug and extractor marks, and that's not what detonated that primer. So that's the difference there. So we know those marks can occur when that cartridge or fire cartridge case is cycling through there, but that's not what detonated that cartridge, and that's the difference in that result. Yes, sir.
Well, let's look at it from the other side of the coin. So you're saying that the breech marks on the primer, where the firing pin hit the primer, did not match up. Item rifle 33, the breech marks on the firing pin didn't match up on these spent cartridges. 111, 114, 15, 118, 119, 123,
Are you saying to each
128.
other, or are you saying to the weapon?
No, sir. When I did compare all of these cartridge cases to each other and with those test cartridge cases fire from it, those items, 111, 114, 115, 118, 119, 123, and 128, due to insufficient corresponding markings on that primer and in those breech face marks, I was unable to determine if they were all fired by item 33 or by another firearm or firearms with similar characteristics. I did examine those, and the results of those comparisons were inconclusive.
So you're saying you didn't, you're not telling jury they don't match. It's just, you couldn't match them. They're inconclusive.
My results of those comparisons were inconclusive. Yes, sir.
Okay.
We've reached, so can we stop
And
talking
then-
about the muffins now? But this is Jim's job,
You
because
also, in your report,
This-
reached the same,
this is evidence the prosecution,
Um,
I think, needs the jury to believe.
you conclude that it's
Jim needs
inconclusive
them not to.
on whether item 33, State's Exhibit 88,
This is the back and forth of trial.
are you saying It's inconclusive whether item 33, exhibit
Don't
88.
play a drinking game
fired
with inconclusive unless you're
237?
hydrating.
That's correct.
Are you saying it's inconclusive as to whether item 33, which is exhibit states 88,
You continue to read that correctly.
at some point in time, loaded and ejected, extracted from item 33?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Well, we just talked about there's a difference between firing and then cycling and extracting
Yes, sir.
tool marks.
Yes, sir.
Did you look at State's Exhibit 88 to see if the extraction marks matched up to items 2 through 7?
Based on the evidence that I received,
Jim is going to
I
make
was
the
able
jury
to
forget
determine that items 2
what they
through
heard
7
earlier because they're going to be so
had those
confused and
matching
bored.
mechanism marks with items 35 through 37, 39, 108, 113, 116 through 117, and 122, to conclude that those items have been loaded into, extracted, and ejected
Sorry about that.
from the same firearm at some
Jim!
previous time.
With the guns!
But you can't identify the firing
Damn it!
of the gun.
Jim's just trying to wake up the jury with that.
Correct. In terms of being
I'm
fired
teasing.
by, I was able to determine that several items had been fired by that rifle, and the results of those comparisons with the other items, SLED items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, 39, 108, 111 through 120, 122 through 124, and 128. Those comparisons with each other and those test cartridge cases fired by the item 33 rifle were inconclusive.
And so, let's see if I can understand
Please.
what you're talking about with regard to your conclusions on
I can hear
That
the
item
printer in the
2 through 7.
courtroom printing.
which were shell casings found near Maggie's body,
Jim doesn't want
And
this to seem easy for the
other
jury.
spent cartridges found around the Murdaugh
The
house
prosecution needed
and
to
at the
make it
shooting
easy.
range. You conclude that they were loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
That's correct.
That's
And
what he
for
said.
those, I guess we have the same issue. You looked at the primer, the breach marks on the primer, and you couldn't make any conclusions on those, right?
When I looked at the primer area where those breech face and firing pin impressions are, the results of including that in a fire by result were inconclusive. And that is the results for items 2 through 7, and 35 through 37, 39, 108, 111 through 120, 122 through 124, and
Which
128.
Jim is making sound confusing, but it's not
And-
really.
And again, aren't the breach marks
Jim's
in the
like,
firing pin,
they're
aren't
not fired from
those
that gun, but they were
more
all
reliable
filed
than
from the same
extractor
gun.
marks when you're doing an analysis?
During the marking of these specimens, if you will, through firing, the machining process to create those firearms, we see tool marks on fire cartridge cases and fire bullets from multiple different processes. I can't say that one's more reliable to mark than the other. It's all due to the machining process and also due to the individual wear and tear of that firearm through use of it in repetitive use or abuse of the firearm. That can also add to the markings in each of those locations that we're looking at, whether it be something from the breech face, from the firing pin, those extractors and ejectors, or even the rifling in the barrel. All of those variables can play into those markings and how we see those and how they reproduce on our evidence and how individual they are to each gun.
Well,
Okay.
that does bring me to another point. Isn't your opinion based upon conclusion that every 300 blackout manufactured in the world, whether it's put together by John Bedingfield or mass assembled at Palmetto State Armory or anywhere in the world, that each one, when they cycle a bullet through and eject it, will produce its own unique, like no other in the world, its own unique tool mark? Isn't that what your opinion is based on?
Again, during the manufacturing of these
Is
components,
that a yes or no?
I would like to explain it a little more.
Your Honor,
if
can I get a
possible.
yes or no and then an explanation?
He does have to answer the questions yes or no if they are asked in a yes or no fashion.
Objecting, you can answer the question.
Restate the question.
Is it your opinion based upon the presumption or the basis of your opinion is that every 300 blackout manufactured in the world produces its own unique set of tool marks when it cycles a bullet through? Yes or no?
I would like to answer that with a little bit of explanation if possible.
That's
Your Honor,
not how
appreciate a yes or no, and he can explain all day long.
That's not how cross-examination works.
Yes or no, you must answer yes or no.
You need to answer what's asked, and the prosecution
Can
can
you
ask
repeat
you
the
on
question one more
redirect.
time? I apologize.
Is it your opinion, in this case, about the
Jim's like,
shell
no, I can't.
cartridges being fired from the same 300 blackout? Isn't that based upon your presumption that each 300 blackout manufactured in the world makes unique tool marks when it cycles a bullet and ejects it?
He's trying to figure out what you're asking.
It's hard to say. I have not looked at every 300 blackout that's in the world, so it's hard to answer that question. But again, based on my knowledge of that process and how they're made, I'm able to support my answer without answering it in a yes or no manner, I suppose.
But you're saying you found
He got Jim to
shells
ask it so
here,
many times that it was a
shells,
little more
cartridges
open-ended so he
here,
can answer.
Cartridges there, cartridges at the murder scene, and they all have very,
Jim's trying to get to this is all wishy-washy, right?
not all the marks are identical, but enough marks are close enough to being identical. In your opinion, they were fired by one weapon in the world.
It's my opinion that those had all been cycled through the same firearm at one point in time. Yes, sir.
But not fired by the same firearm.
No, sir. That's not what my conclusions say. As far as being fired by that firearm or by the same gun, those results are inconclusive.
So that means that the markings on the breech, because they were all fired, they all have a fire pin hitting the primer, and you call that breech markings, correct?
Yes, sir. Those are breech face markings that we would see on the primer.
And there were dissimilar the similarities between those where you couldn't reach a conclusion.
That's correct. Those shared, again, those same class characteristics. So we compared those to each other. Based on our comparisons, that's correct. There were not enough, there's not enough agreement. There was insufficient agreement there for me to reach a conclusion based on my training and experience and looking at all of these cartridge cases that I could say that they were fired by the same firearm. And that's how
He's
we
like,
arrived
I'm
at
not
that
going to
conclusion.
answer your yes or no questions in a yes or no fashion. I'm
And,
going to explain. That's what's happening.
Can you say when those tool markings were made on the, or when the, scratch that. Is there any way to determine, for you to determine when the shell casings, cartridges were cycled and ejected in this one firearm that's unique to all others in the world?
I cannot date when those were fired or when those were loaded into, extracted, and ejected from a firearm. No, sir. I cannot put a timestamp, if you will, on that. No, sir.
And you can't state
That's
whether
fair.
it was a 300 blackout assembled in it was a 2016 given for Christmas gift, or if it was a replacement given in 2017 or 2018.
I guess that's fair.
You don't know what year the gun was that cycled and ejected.
Jim is closing
That's
down.
correct. I do not have knowledge on the year of manufacture of these firearms.
Okay.
He's narrowing down what the
Now let's
prosecution
move on
can
to
argue,
the,
or he's trying to narrow down what the prosecution can argue. It's a
And-
circumstantial case, so
you were, clear a few things up. You were shown a lot of,
thank you all for the gifted
Items that
memberships.
were
I see them coming in. Thank you,
taken,
Allie. Thank you, Serenity.
unfired
Thank you, Paul Printed.
shot shells, And this is 12 gauge. I'm going to show you exhibit 143, 144, 145, 6, 7, 8.
Jim's just going to get
Down
the
here,
jury
all the way
so
50.
far
I'm not
away,
going to ask you to take these out, but I want you to
so far away from what the prosecution said everybody's going to forget. They're going to be like,
take a
what?
look at all those and tell me when those were seized or taken into evidence in this case.
I mean, the defense attorney is just doing defense attorney things. No beef with how he's doing them. At some point, he actually cleared things up a little bit at the beginning. He really likes this line of questioning. You're not here to tell the jury X, Y, Z. He likes that line of questioning. I think it can be really helpful. So what you're not telling the jury is this. It clears it up for the jury.
I do see a date on the packaging. Some of these packages are ripped right through it. That states 9/13/21.
Okay. And so you understand that is June, July, 3 months after these murders, correct?
Yes, sir.
That is a good
September
point.
13th will be several months after the murder.
That is a good point.
And that those were seized at different places around the property?
Yes, sir. According to the information here, it appears they were from different locations where they were collected from. Yes, sir.
Okay. And
So yes,
but you don't know whether,
you don't know if they were on the property
property
the night of the
open to
murders.
Alec Murdaugh, from June till September, as far as you know, right?
I have no knowledge of that. No, sir.
And if
Jim?
he had the mind to, he could go out and remove it, every shotgun shell on the whole property.
It's like what
Right.
I argued earlier.
I have no knowledge of how the scene was maintained.
Well, it would appear that no one removed any shotgun shells since you have them there in your lap, right?
It does appear that these were collected from these areas listed on the package on September 3rd, or I assume it's September 13 as it's dated and labeled by
Well,
the person who collected these.
no one
Okay.
executed a search warrant the night of the murders because they
Show
thought it was
you-
no big deal. So yeah, this is where we're at. Leaves the defense a lot of room to argue that those bullets came onto the property later. But
Exhibit 63 and
One of them is
60 what I
on
marked
Paul
is
Murdaugh's
64.
nightstand.
These are pages.
It's very
51,
chilling
55,
that the round or the type of ammunition that killed him is on his nightstand. Who would put that there after he was killed with dry lock? Who would put that on
And
his
will you just confirm
nightstand?
this for me, 63,
So-
64, pages
I don't know.
50.
The argument goes both ways
1 and
on
55
90% of this trial. It's like, could be this, could be that. And that's hard. Thank you, Blues, for the super chat. So it's one of those things. It truly cuts either way. A lot of this case. So it is. It's who would do that? And who would have access to the house to do that? The only person that's at the house till September is Alec Murdaugh until he gets
Yes, sir. I
arrested
do
in September.
recognize Defendant's Exhibit 63 appears to be a copy of an item 10 worksheet for the fired shot shell.
Isabel, you, me, and Shaggy are all on that path. Yes, because the police didn't want to disrupt Alec and his family when they were grieving, so they didn't search the property. So now the defense gets to look at them and be like, "Well,
And
you didn't search
Defendant's
the property,
Exhibit
so
64
fuck off."
appears to be a copy of my worksheet for SLED item 14, which were 24 birdshot pellets.
Thank you. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce in the evidence Defendant 63 and 64 at this time.
Sure. Can you tell us what it is,
Doug,
Jim?
if you'll pull up 63, which is
Friday.
page 51
We're struggling.
of the report, and Agent Greer, will you tell the jury what this is?
Yes, this is just a copy of one of our standard worksheets that we use to document evidence in the laboratory. So this is an ammunition and cartridge case worksheet, which is why I utilized it when I was documenting the item 10 fired shot shell. And this contains my notes that I took on that item.
Okay, and just so that we're
Ammunition.
clear,
There
are
was
we talking
ammunition on
about
Paul's nightstand.
Exhibit 33? This is the black colored shot shell that was found in the feed room where
That was taken
Paul
from
Murdaugh
Paul's
was
nightstand.
murdered.
That was taken from Paul's nightstand in
Yes, sir, that
September.
is correct. State Exhibit 33 is the item we're discussing.
No one.
And you have a
knows.
name under notes. It says on shot shell, says quote, dry lock 3-inch 2. You see that?
Yes, sir, I
You see
do.
that, Doug? Can you highlight that?
So because law enforcement didn't execute a search warrant the night of the
And,
murders, we don't know when the round got put
And
on
again,
Paul Murdaugh's
the
nightstand.
exhibit there,
No,
and
nobody
that's what
knows.
you're talking about, right?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
And number 2 is the size of the pellet.
Yes, sir, that would refer to the size of the pellets or birdshot that was, that we would believe to have been loaded into that cartridge, or that shot shell, excuse me.
Okay. And then if you'll go to exhibit 64, page 55, Doug, and it's 55 in your report, Agent Greer. And are these the pellets that were provided to you to analyze the number 2 size pellets?
Yes, sir, SLED item 14, I determined to be 24 birdshot pellets, and those were listed as being from dog food storage room.
Okay. And if you'll look at under the caliber, it says number 2, and it says steel. These were steel pellets, were they not?
Based on my examination, based on my observation, yes, sir, they were magnetic. So that would provide that they had some steel in them, yes, sir.
And birdshot can either be steel or lead, I suspect. Maybe there's
Oh,
a third
God.
kind.
Triggered.
There can be multiple different
He's already said he's not a hunter.
metals used in making pellets. Lead is one, steel is one. There are also other metals that can be used in making pellets, yes, sir.
Have you analyzed any of the Winchester dry locks that were seized in September of 2021 to see whether they're steel or lead?
No, sir, I have not analyzed their contents.
Okay.
Were you
Now,
asked
here
to?
you've got
Because I
exhibit
imagine he wasn't
64.
asked to.
You've got grain weight, and won't you explain what you're referring to? I guess I needed.
I imagine the defense
I'm
will
missing
have
a
an
page
expert
for that.
to refute
So
this
if you'll
at some
look at
point.
your page 54 in your file, because it says continued from Wade, and I guess that's on page 54. Is that right?
No, sir, that's just referencing from the weight category that's kind of at the top portion of the page.
Okay.
I just continued my thoughts down below.
Well, so help me out here. You say there's 5
Please.
pellets weighed 3.4 grams, and then 18 pellets only weighed 3.6 grams. How does that work?
I weighed each of those pellets individually. And again, we're weighing in grains. And when I weighed those on our scale, that is what I documented. 5 of them weighed 3.4, and that should be a piece. 18 of them each weighed 3.6 grains, and 1 pellet weighed 3.8 grains.
Okay.
So they
So the
Weigh
total
slightly
of them
different
altogether
amounts.
was approximately 86.4 grains.
Great.
So-
Thank you for explaining that.
each one weighed
Um,
slightly different amounts.
You also weighed the grains of
Brass,
the
rice.
300 blackout projectiles. And you don't have that in front of us right here, but did you not weigh the grains there?
Yes, sir, I did.
And if you got it, just tell us what they were.
Did you not is always a weird question for me.
I believe you said
Did you not?
147 grains.
No, I did.
State's Exhibit
I don't know
50,
how to answer did you not.
which is your item 8 on your report.
Yes, sir. When I weighed SLED item 8, which was one fired bullet, it was approximately 147.4 grains.
And are you familiar with how 300 blackout ammunition is sold, what weight classes there are?
I don't know all of the different weights that are within that caliber, no, sir.
Weight classes.
Do you know there's
There's
like
weight
a
classes.
subsonic and then supersonic?
Supersonic.
Again, I don't know everything about that caliber. There are various weights that bullets are sold in for each caliber. So I would not be surprised at other grain weights, but I don't know all of them off the top of my head today.
So as far as you know, the only weight you could ever get is 147 grams. Right?
When I weighed these.
Oh yeah, Jim
items,
went from being a city
item
boy
8
to
and
knowing
item
everything.
12, they weighed
Yep.
approximately 147.
The jury won't forget that though, because the "forgive me, I'm a city boy" disappeared real quick with all of this. So I don't think the jury will forget that. But we are now at subsonic, supersonic. I am definitely grumpy today. I am grumpy. I am tired. I am confused. It's
You mentioned-
tedious. It's hard to listen to. It's not always
Yeah.
clear questioning.
Testimony.
It's
That,
just today is tough. Yep. So I'm
Item
definitely grumpy.
32, which is Exhibit
I like
91,
this witness though.
had a Winchester and a Federal 12-gauge shotgun shells in here. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir. They did have 2 unfired 12-gauge shot shells submitted with it. That's correct.
I can't imagine
But
being
you
a
did more
juror
than that.
today.
You testified
They're so
shortly ago.
they've
You
got to be
said
so tired.
One was a Winchester and one was a Federal, I believe.
Yes, sir. One is a Federal premium heavyweight TSS, and one is a 12-gauge Winchester Longbeard XR, I believe.
But is it a long red
Winchester is
beard?
not a dry lock, correct?
No, sir. The markings on that shell said a Longbeard XR.
Okay.
I am
And,
so lost in what the fuck is the difference between a long beard
Winchester found
and a
murder
turkey
scene was
leg
dry lock, correct?
and a macarena. I don't
The
know.
item
I do know that a
10
turkey
shot
is a
shell,
land
which was
bird.
recovered from marker 10, which I do believe, my understanding is that around the body of Margaret Murdaugh was a
No.
Winchester 12-gauge shell,
No,
and it says dry lock on it.
Paul.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
no, that's Paul, not Maggie. You misspoke.
And then item 22, which is the gun that
The tennis near Paul.
Murdaugh came down, was holding or was leaning up against his Suburban when Deputy Daniel Green arrived.
Jim, just take a breath, take a minute.
That
It's
was-
fine. Jim, just find the gun
Do
you
you
want.
understand loaded with a 12-gauge and a 16-gauge shell, correct?
When I received it, it was unloaded, but I did receive a 12-gauge shell and a 16-gauge shell. That's correct.
And we've already
If
heard
you
from the,
fire a 16-gauge shell and a 12-gauge shotgun, what's likely to happen?
That's something that I have not done, so I'm unable to answer that question.
he's like,
Is it dangerous to do such a thing?
I'd really like to not to.
As a firearms examiner, I would recommend shooting the ammo that your firearm is chambered for. I can't predict what would happen if you shot that shot.
He's like, not legal advice,
Or
but maybe a bad
attempted.
idea. But maybe a bad idea. Jim was looking for that gun and was like, I'm done. I love that Jim's old school with the legal pad on. That's how he preps his witnesses. That's how I did a lot of my witness prep too. With the legal pad, it makes sense. Jim is.
You spoke
doing
of
a good
this
job of confusing
review
shit.
process at SLED with regard
And
to
that's
to
his
your
job.
Toolmark analysis. And you said you do your analysis, you look at things under a microscope and you type up a report.
Yes, sir. I look at the evidence, reach a conclusion, and write or type those conclusions. Yes, sir.
And then a reviewer, someone, and in this case, what was his name? Initial CW?
The reviewer was Chad Smith, another examiner within our department.
Is he?
Wait, is
on
Chad the
same
one with the
level
dog?
With you at SLED?
We miss
He
Chad.
is also an examiner, I don't know his classification, but he
Chad's-
has been employed in the department
Different Chad. with-
longer than I have, completing firearms examination.
Can we bring back Chad and Evo? We
And-
miss them.
And then he looks at it, but does he prepare an independent report and then flips the two over and see if they match? Or does he just take a look at it, come up with his thoughts, and then look at your document to see if he agrees with it?
He does not prepare an independent report. No, he does look at the evidence and arrive at those conclusions. And he would read my results. If he agrees with them, then he will sign off on those
This is the
conclusions.
peer review,
If he
Chad.
disagrees with
Not-
them,
not
then
puppy
there's
Chad.
also a procedure for that to happen.
Now, you mentioned that in order to make an identification or a match, or you have to have a certain number of similar, or is it similar or identical characteristics?
In order to make an identification, we want to see sufficient agreement between the individual characteristics. There's not a certain number that I use, as we use a method called pattern matching. And we're looking at, under the microscope, all these tiny striations and impressions, and looking at the surface contours of those two tool marks with each other.
Y'all, I know
And
a
we're
lot of
looking
you
at
are like,
those
being on a jury
individual
would be
peaks
great. And then you
ridges
sit through days like this and
comparing
you're like,
those under
ah,
fine identification in order to make an identification.
I know,
And
y'all.
based on that, through our training and
I know.
experience at doing this job, we look at thousands of comparisons and conduct thousands of comparisons. During that time, we look at things that match each other that we know have been fired from the same gun or made by the same tool. And we look at things that have been fired by separate guns and see if there's any agreement or disagreement. And we look at thousands of these cartridge cases and bullets and tool marks in order to learn what that sufficient agreement is to make our identification.
okay.
Okay, and you gave this jury an analogy like a ladder, and that you have to get up
Jim's
so
like,
many
okay.
steps as you reach. The first step, I guess, would be rifle or shotgun, right? And then the second step would
Thank you,
be
chat, for keeping me
caliber of
awake.
rifle, if we're talking about a rifle. Then you keep going up the ladder.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're going to look at those class characteristics. So we're going to determine if they're the same
Oh, yes.
caliber.
His job
Do
is to
they share
confuse the
same
jury.
rifling
That's his whole job.
specifications if they're a fired bullet?
Whole job.
If they are, then we can compare those. If, for instance, if a bullet has 5 lands and groove and it's going to the right, and we compare that to another bullet that has 6 lands and grooves and it's going to the left, then we know those did not come out the same barrel. So there's no need to do any type of comparison there. However, if we look at 2 that have those same lands and grooves, those 5 lands and grooves, and they're all going to the right, they're the same caliber, then we'll go up that ladder, if you will, and compare those individual characteristics to see if they were fired by the same firearm or not.
I wonder how I
Tell
decide
us,
if I'm
jury,
spending
how many
money.
steps of that ladder you have to go up before you can
Is it worth
make
it?
an identification.
Do I want it?
As
I
far
need
as
it.
making identification,
Ladder.
it's based on the marks that what we
I need
see
to do a Sephora.
under the microscope. When
Jim?
we're looking at all of these marks,
You're
we wanna
going to
see
bore
that
me into
sufficient
online
agreement.
shopping
Again,
in a minute.
we want to see enough agreement so that what is there is better than any agreement that we've seen in tool marks that have been created by different tools. And that's
I like this witness and I'm
that's
tired.
learned on the job.
It's 5
doing
o'clock
this,
in the east.
Doing practicals that I
Cheers.
did in training.
We've got to
looking
be
at
almost done for the
thousands of
day.
Comparisons of things that I've test fired, that I know were fired from the same gun, looking at things that I've test fired from different guns and looking at that. It's also done through studies that I participated in training. I'm looking at things that help us know what that sufficient agreement is within all of those features and looking at the totality of those markings. So we're not going to base our opinion just on one little mark. We're going to look at the entire surface area of that bullet, the entire surface area of that cartridge case in order to make our
smooth in the way he
conclusion.
presents info, though.
We're not looking at
I'm
one little
literally ready
marking
for
and
him to
making
tell
an
me stuff on QVC.
identification. So we have to think of the totality of all the markings that we see under the microscope.
So the short answer to my question, there is no
Douglas
set number of
Stevens.
steps on the ladder you have to reach before.
Thank you for the
can
50 gifted memberships to
make
the
your
Law
decision.
Nerds.
We
That's
use
incredibly generous. Thank you.
Excuse me, a method of pattern
Thank you all
matching
for the
again,
gifted
and that's how we
memberships to
do
the
it. And
channel.
that's a widely
And spreading the
accepted
law nerd love. Thank you,
method
Silence.
throughout all firearms
Thank you,
examiners
Oreo Love
in
Bug.
the United States and the world, really. That's what we've been using for years to complete firearms identification, and that's what's been widely accepted.
Why
looking
let
at
him
these
do this
patterns
twice?
and comparing them in order to make our identification and reach our conclusion.
Well, now you say it's been widely accepted, but isn't it true that, that your field of expertise has come under criticism by the
Runkle of the Bailey.
the scientific community?
There has been criticism, but again, there's been research completed to support firearms identification, if you will.
Well, I mean, the National Academy of Scientists issued a report and was pretty critical of the objectivity of your work, that it is more subjective because you don't have a set number of ladders, rings on a ladder you got to reach. It's based upon your experience, your training, and your opinion. But there's no objective criteria by which to measure whether something matches or not. Isn't that, you're aware of that criticism by the National Academy of Scientists, right?
I'm aware of some of the criticism, yes, sir. However, the process of making the identification is subjective in nature, but it's based on some objective data that we're looking at. There's, again, lots of information that we're looking at, the contours of those tool marks, the individual peaks and ridges of those tool
He
marks.
has to know this question is going to come up every time he
Not just looking to
testifies.
see, is this a match and it looks good? We're really looking under high magnification at all of these features to see what agreement or disagreement that we can determine. And again, that's based on some objectivity, of how we arrived to that situation.
And you can
You
have
agree that your chosen
review.
field is part art as much as science, right?
Our field is an applied science, really. We do use lighting and angles to look at these features under the microscope, and it's important to know how to move those items around and move those lighting and those different stages on our microscope in order to see some of these markings. It can be difficult to do, and there is a special technique that you have to learn in looking at this and doing it and using that microscope to really become familiar and efficient.
Did you agree with me previously in this courtroom under oath that this profession you're in is part art?
There is some art to it, and that's just the lighting thing. For example, we have to look at that, and we have to use that oblique lighting in order to make some of those.
Isn't there an
striations
art
show
to
up.
doing just about
Again,
everything?
These are tiny little marks that we're looking
There's
at.
an art
that we're
to
looking
it.
at under
There's an art to
magnification.
handprint analysis
But
or
the field
handwriting
itself is
analysis.
not
There's an
art.
art
It's
to
applied
fingerprint
science.
analysis.
We're using scientific processes to reach these conclusions.
There's an art to medicine
Excuse me, these conclusions.
and law.
With years of research to support it.
You first examined item 22
We're with you,
back
Jim.
in June of 2021.
We're all
correct?
singing from the same sheet of music this afternoon.
Which is
Yes.
the rifle, the shotgun that Alec Murdaugh had that was taken by Deputy Green, right?
Yes, sir. Item 22 was a Benelli model Super Black Eagle, and I did receive that item in June. Yes, sir.
And when did you receive? I'm not going to pick it up again. but I
Yeah,
dropped
medicine's
it.
not exact either. And I say
Yeah,
fingerprinting's
it's almost
art
past
because you have to
5 o'clock
decide
on
if it's going to
Friday.
be
I don't
powder
know,
or
3
glue or light.
a bit more
or
of a
whatever.
delay, but when did you receive the 300 blackout?
Is that the item 33 rifle?
Yes,
you're
sir.
referring to?
I am surprised that Jim didn't
I
end on that
received
line of
item
questioning.
33, which was inside SLED container K on June 10th.
We do. The
And-
same
and
could be
when
said
did
about you,
Issue
Jim.
your
Laws and
preliminary
art.
opinions
It's based on
on
facts,
item
but it's an
33 and
art.
item 22 to your agency, SLED.
Um,
I still object to him being a SLED agent. He doesn't have the same beard. Y'all, I'm tired. I see a lot of you asking about how to get gifted memberships. I know the mods have been sharing
I
a link.
released
You have to
some
turn it on
results
in
to
your Google
our
account.
agents and investigators on June 10th.
So you have to
June 10th. Yes, sir.
turn it on so that you can opt in.
Are you
to get
aware
this.
after June 10th that SLED dive teams have been going out in Colleton County, diving the waters, trying to find murder weapons?
So you've got to go to
I'm not
allow
aware
chats
of what all our
or allow
dive teams
gifts.
were doing. No, sir.
Well, you certainly didn't report to the folks who were relying on your work that we found the murder weapons, did you?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
You
that,
didn't
sir?
report to the folks at SLED who rely upon your analysis that, hey, Eureka, we got the murder weapons.
So it should be in
no,
the
sir,
chat that you can
that's
turn
not
on
what I
allow
reported.
gifts.
And you've never received any projectiles from the shooting range at Moselle to compare.
Objection, Your Honor, ask and answer.
Yes, it is.
That's my question, yeah.
Jim, he's saying it's been asked and answered.
Have you ever received any projectiles from the shooting range at Moselle to compare to
Now it's asked and answered.
the
Let him finish. and then
projectile
object.
item number 8?
Object again.
Object, it's been asked and answered.
It has been.
Possibly, but you can answer it. Again,
The court's
if you've
lost
answered it
track.
before.
Based on my understanding of the scene, I do not believe I received any projectiles from that shooting area. But that's based on my understanding of where I believe the other projectiles were recovered from.
When you
The
got
judge is like,
item
can we be done?
22, the shotgun, do you know whether it had been swabbed on the inside of the barrel?
I believe it had been processed by other departments. However, I do not know what those swabs entailed.
If a shotgun has been recently fired, does it leave evidence in the barrel that soot stuff?
Yes, sir. It's possible that we would see some type of residue from firing in that barrel.
Stuff.
And are you aware that Agent Worley swabbed the top before she removed the 16 gauge shell from it?
Does it
But
matter
no, sir,
to
I do
him?
not know what Agent Worley did in this investigation.
Can you see residue with the naked eye of a shotgun that just recently been fired?
Sometimes, yes, sir. And that is something that we also document as part of our examination of the firearm. And when I looked into the barrel and looked down the bore of the item 22 shotgun, I do have in my case file circled that I noticed some fouling or residue in the barrel.
Was it recent fouling or residue, or was it just a dirty
Fouling?
gun?
I can't date when that fouling was placed there. That residue was placed there. No, sir, I can't put a time on it.
What about the 300 blackout? Was it? I think you have a note there's some fouling there, but maybe I'm.
Well, Jim, does he or
Confusing.
doesn't he? Just tell him what page
Yes,
it's
sir,
on.
that's correct. On the item 33 rifle,
sir,
I did
line-
note that
line
there was some
22.
fouling or residues in that barrel.
The opinion that you have provided this court as to the shell casings from the murder scene, which are items, SLED items 2 through 7, and that your opinion is that they were loaded into, extracted and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time with items 35 through
Honestly, I'm surprised that
37,
Harpootlian's not
39,
asleep.
108, 113, 116, 17, and 122, and those are shell casings that were found around the house and
I need a
at the
nap.
shooting range.
I'm
Your
so-
opinion that they were loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm. Do you hold that opinion with 100% certainty?
Yes, sir. That is my opinion.
Yes, sir.
That is the conclusion
what I
that I
said.
reached.
Did you ever tell Agent Owen that you could not forensically state with 100% certainty?
No, sir. When I arrived at that conclusion, that was my conclusion. And it was also agreed upon by the reviewing examiner.
When I got to my
So if
conclusion,
there's a
that's my
note in
conclusion.
Agent Owen's report that you couldn't reach it with 100% certainty, then someone has made a mistake.
I don't know the contents of Agent Owen's report.
Or the context. or the context of Agent Owen's report. Ask Agent Owen.
That's all I have.
You redirect.
No. What do you need to redirect on? Darn it. We're so close. Chat, we're so close to being done for the day. Today is slogging. Some days of trial are great. Some days of trial, you just watch video deposition all day. Oh. They're taking a stand break. We're almost done. Oh, the music brought the Fred. Fred's back on the desk, ready to have his moment. Or throw my pens off the desk. Don't forget to stretch. All right. My husband loves the goat and pickle. Thank you for your coverage. You're welcome. He's giving Ed Norton vibes. Sure. Any decent hunter cleans and maintains their guns. There would be no visible blood left on it. I mean,
Mr. Greer, I'm handing you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 400. Could you kindly review that very, very quickly
I am cash.
and let me know if you're familiar with what
This
it
is a risk the prosecution runs of setting up that Alec Murdaugh had a lot of enemies. Though, if he's at the kennels so close in time, why wouldn't his enemies just take him out? Unless they're setting him up for murder, but that's a whole conspiracy theory that the defense won't be able to introduce because it's too far-fetched. But it does. It does. I'm not shocked that a privileged rich man took from the poor or was greedy, even to the people he loved. I mean, I'm not shocked either, and I don't know if anybody on this jury would be either. They live in this area. They know the Murdaughs. But the defense has gone down the road of this is a loving family, and Alec would never do anything like this. So pointing out that he would do things that people didn't expect is important. A lot of people had said the guns are buried with his dad. A lot of speculation about that. The day of the second interview, where Alec may or may not have confessed, depending on if you heard I or they or it's or whatever, is the day his father passed. So they hadn't really searched any of these locations, and
yes,
they sure
sir.
shit hadn't searched his mother's
This
house.
appears to be a copy of my report.
It's an accurate, complete copy of your report.
Yes, sir, it does appear to be.
All the things we just discussed today.
Yes, sir.
State would move to admit.
Caps and Kit Kat,
State's Exhibit
Hot Mess
400.
Jess, and Peggy, thank you for the gifted memberships. Jim just wanted to stand up again. Thank you for the
Some of
gifted memberships.
Questions concerned your field.
Don't forget to turn gifting on
Please
in
tell
the
us,
chat
how
window.
long has firearms identification and Toolmark identification, how long has it been around?
In its current form,
It's a
I would say the
tale
early
as old as
1900s is
time.
when this really became popular, and firearms identification was born with several important cases. It was as early as the 1900s that they started looking at this evidence and looking at those individual characteristics through microscopy. So ever since that time, it's just evolved and grew with further research and support, advances in technology, and but it's been around for several years.
That's more than several.
And are you familiar with any studies that were done utilizing what would be called consecutive barrels
Yes,
of
sir.
firearms? Explain to us what a consecutive barrel study would be and what what's done in those.
Vanessa, this is
Sure.
a fair point.
When we're looking at those characteristics under the microscope that were imparted onto a fired bullet or
The evidence should go
excuse
back
me, a
and
fired
be,
bullet or a cartridge case,
the court
and we're
evidence should be
looking at all
maintained every
those
night
tiny
securely
little
and locked up.
features. A consecutively manufactured
Should be.
study takes into the account of the manufacturing process. So all those marks as we discussed are coming from that gun being produced by a manufacturer.
Fair.
Metal scraping and removing metal. So we have tools cutting and tool stamping and really working on hard metal surfaces. So when we look at a
B.
study
Vargas, I
that
agree.
has consecutively manufactured things, that presents an opportunity for a worst case scenario for us as examiners. If
Truly,
those
that
tools
wasn't a
were going to
super
leave
aggressive
markings
cross-examination,
on
to be fair, to
other
Jim.
firearms, so if you had this breech face being made by the tool and it
Nicole,
made
that's
the
already
next
been
one, it made the
proven.
next one, those are consecutively manufactured. If there's any carryover of those characteristics from one to another,
That's been proven by
that's what
two
that study
witnesses.
does. It highlights that, and it puts that as an emphasis as part of that study. And we as examiners are looking at that, that's our worst case scenario. If we're going to see any carryover of that tool making that item or that breech face, we would expect to see marks. There's several studies that are out there, and I've participated in several of those as part of my training, where we're given samples that have been fired by consecutively manufactured barrels. So if we see any agreement between each of those barrels, we should see it there. Or studies where we have consecutively manufactured breech faces. Again, those are breech faces made by the same tool, one right after another. And if we see agreement in there, we should see it in that study. I've participated in those studies, in those research projects. Some of them have been studies prior to me becoming an examiner. And I was able to clearly distinguish and accurately distinguish between those projectiles. So I was able to determine those projectiles were fired by this barrel, this barrel, this barrel, and this barrel, or that cartridge case was fired by this gun with that breech face, this gun with that breech face, and this gun with that breech face. So we are aware of that in our community, and we do things to be proactive on that. And that's just an example. And that's something I participated in and was able to successfully pass as part of my competency in determining what was fired by what in those consecutively manufactured studies.
They all said 3 weeks. I feel lied to and
consecutively
misled.
manufactured, one after the other, right after the other.
That is correct.
And
No, it's
just for
not
clarity, we're talking about, I'm referring to
Not common
items
at all.
33 and 22 on your report. That would be the item 33.
Though
being
the agents
blackout
may have
rifle,
someone on
and
their
then item
team
22
who doesn't know the
on
case.
Camouflage Black Eagle 3.
I would
Yes,
watch
sir.
my colleagues' trials at the DA's
The
office and tell
results
them
for
the things
some
I
of
was
those,
confused about if I
when you
didn't
say
know the case well.
inconclusive, what does that mean? Does that mean that they could have been
Normally
fired,
someone
or
else
that
in the office.
you just can't determine?
That's correct. Inconclusive is
I'll get to that in a minute.
one of our conclusions that we can issue when there's not enough agreement or disagreement
Thank
there
you,
in those tiny microscopic characteristics. So what inconclusive means is it's possible it could have been fired by that gun, and it's possible that it may not have been fired by that gun.
We do need an NFL air horn. I'm trying to get to questions. Where was Alec M. when his father died?
Attention to states,
Alec and
to
all
your
of his
item
family members
Number 165,
were
States
in-
Exhibit 147.
They were getting interviewed at John
Remind us again
Marvin's
what that
hunting
item is?
cottage. It was the second interview. They got the call at the end of the second interview that his father had passed. So
Could I
they
see
were
item
in that police
165?
interview
Make
when
me
that
find it.
happened.
Sorry.
It's fine.
They're all like, it's late in the day. I think the evidence today adds pieces to the puzzle. Question: have you seen a juror fall asleep during a trial? Yes, lots. Generally not during my questioning, though. I'm a bit entertaining, but yes, lots, especially after lunch.
Would you be able to find it in your report?
Rare in the
if you
morning.
have it?
More common after lunch. Normally, it's
No,
a
sir, I'm
process.
not sure that I would be able
Once you see the jurors in the back row start to lean against the wall, and then you see the arms go, and then you see the head go, you can generally see the progress. And then they end up like that. And that's when they're gone. And generally, the court will either take a stand break, a bathroom break. Another juror will kind of nudge them. But yes, jurors do fall asleep.
And I entered into evidence of States 147. That
It
would
can
be
be
slide
boring.
Item 165.
And it's a lot of information. At some point, your brain
Yes,
is like,
sir.
I can't.
Did you identify what it is again and where it was located when it was found, more importantly?
Yes, sir. This was a Winchester 12 gauge shot shell. And on the side of the shot shell, it's stamped dry lock 3-inch 2. On the packaging for States Exhibit 147, it says from nightstand in Paul's room.
Now, I know counsel asked you a question about, your field being an applied science, just so we understand what an applied science is. Are there any other examples of fields that are applied in that general realm of applied sciences?
Yes, sir. A lot of what we do as
What's
firearms
an
examiner
applied
is
science?
learned through our process of training and looking at samples and learning the job. It's kind of like, if you will, a physician. They go to school. They learn a lot in their medical school, but they still do a residency program, if you will. So they're on
going
the
with the
job,
medicine
doing
example.
on-the-job training.
Comparing what he does to,
You asked, counsel,
Continue.
Please continue.
and you knew he said this in the evidentiary hearing. I
So
object to
they
him comparing
learn
it to
things in
medicine.
school. The firearms identification is not something that you can necessarily go to a school and learn to do. You can't get a 4-year degree and become a firearms examiner the next day. There are universities across the nation that have firearms
objection worked.
identification as part
It
of their
shifted
firearms
his
program,
answer.
and they're teaching that component. But in order to achieve your competency at this, you need
objection worked,
on-the-job
though.
training. You need the experience in looking at these samples and knowing how to evaluate the markings that we're looking at on these ammunition components.
Lastly, Agent Greer, Mr. Greer.
The objection shut down the answer, though.
Put that on the screen.
I'm worried for Jim. He's gonna pop part of that pen off in his mouth. We need to get Jim some jelly
Direct your
beans.
Attention to item 128. Can you see that on your screen, Mr. Greer?
Yes, sir, I can.
Specifically, your findings concerning 2 through 7.
This
You see
afternoon.
where my pen's pointing?
Yes, sir, I do.
Which items were 2 through 7?
Those were from markers 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 respectively. And from my understanding of the crime scene, those were the ones that were located around Margaret Murdaugh's body.
What kind of pen do you think Jim's
Again, we're on
rocking?
what page now, Mr. Greer?
That's on page 7. Yes, sir.
Precise V pilot, you
Items
think?
2 through 7 found around Maggie's body. Items 35 through 37 and
The
39. Where were
prosecution's
those
trying to
located?
find the point again.
Those were from the side entrance door, which would be the door, I believe, coming out of the gun room area.
And items 108, 113, 116 through 17, and 122, where were those located?
Those were from various areas,
Yes,
thought to be from the shoot field or from the field.
it is
And tell me
boring.
again what your conclusion was.
This is the important
I was
part.
able to
This.
determine that based on matching characteristics in the mechanism marks that items 2 through 7, 35 through 37, 39, 108, 113, 116 through 117, and 122 had all been loaded into, extracted, and ejected from the same firearm at some previous time.
Sit down.
Nothing further.
Thank you.
Further examination.
No recross. Let it go. Let it go.
No, Your Honor.
Let it go.
All right, thank you. You may step down.
We made it.
While
We've-
he's preparing to step down, ladies and gentlemen, we will recess for the remainder of the day and the weekend, and we'll need you back at 11:30
Oh, shit.
on
More
Monday
404.
morning, 11:30. Please do not discuss the case.
There's music from somewhere. I hear music. Why do I hear music? What started? Oh, my S-word device started playing "Let It Go" by Vitamin String Quartet. That's really funny. I was like, why is there music? Why is there music? Oh, that's hilarious. All right. Thanks for that. The court will come back to talk about the scheduling. The court is not off the bench yet. So, yeah. All right. Let's see. The jury will be back at 11:30. Bring the audio.
Which witnesses will you have?
Your Honor, if we're talking about the in-camera hearing, we'll have Mark Tinsley. And we do have another issue, which I believe I had indicated to Your Honor perhaps in a pretrial conversation as to a conversation that took place a few days after the crimes occurred, in which there were a number of individuals present. Mr. Murdaugh was present. I don't know the contents of that meeting because I've been out of an abundance of caution, have stayed away from that. And I believe that we may have a little bit of testimony just on whether or not there is any attorney-client privilege to that conversation. I've been careful throughout this investigation preparation not to be privy to that, but I do believe that it is not an attorney-client privilege conversation, but I'd like the court's ruling on that before I became privy to the contents of that. That's the only other issue at this time that I think would be addressed in camera that morning.
Your Honor, and sort of a surprise here. Were those conversations recorded?
No. And I mentioned this in our quick trial.
Yeah, I just didn't know what you're referring to. Neither one of us know what the contents of those conversations are.
I believe Mr. Griffin was present at this meeting, which is exactly why I wanted the court's ruling before I became privy to the contents of the defendant's statements at that meeting.
We're not quite sure, but we'll wait with bated breath to hear whatever it is.
All of us will.
Can you be more specific as to what you're talking about?
Yes,
Mr. Ward?
please.
From my understanding, there was a meeting or some sort of gathering in which Mr. Griffin and Mr. Murdaugh and then a number of other individuals were present.
Then it's not
in which
privileged.
the defendant made some statements. The contents.
Individuals?
No. I think some of his partners and other individuals, maybe some family,
Then it's
to
not-
which I have never been privy to the contents.
Then it's not private.
However, I would like to know the contents, but I've been careful out of an abundance of caution not to ever become privy until I had a ruling from the court that there was no attorney-client privilege because of the presence of third parties to that
Yes.
conversation.
Yes.
So I would like
Agreed.
to address that with the court, and if the court believes that and rules that there is no attorney-client privilege, then I may
Through which witness?
at the appropriate time examine people who were present at that conversation as to what the defendant said.
It's not attorney-client privilege. It's not a private meeting.
And is that in relation to financial crimes or?
No, sir, that would be in relation to the murders of Maggie and Paul.
Oh,
It is an in-camera matter that if we have the time available, I wanted to raise that with the court. Maybe we can go ahead and knock that one out as well.
All
yes.
right.
Bring the witness.
Any thoughts by the defense?
Jim.
Your Honor, what
Jim?
he's referring to is, it was
Jim?
on Thursday, June the 10th, when SLED came to John Marvin Murdaugh's hunting property to interview Alec, to interview John Marvin Murdaugh, Randy Murdaugh, Buster Murdaugh, and I was there to represent Alec for purposes of that. Before
But
SLED got there, we were all
that's not
in
private.
the house. I have no idea what beyond that he's talking about. I mean, what was supposedly said or heard, or I have no
He
idea.
knows.
But beyond that,
Who's the witness?
I don't know of any conversations that he's trying to find the substance of.
You were
and
there.
Who he's going to get them from?
And who he's going to get them from. Jim's like, nobody's talking to you, Creighton. And Creighton's like,
Your Honor, I think that's just it. We would have a witness as to the circumstances of who was present, and in the event that Your Honor rules that because of the presence of third parties,
Ooh.
it was not a protected conversation, then I would become privy or asked to become privy to the content of that. And again, that isn't
Asking by inquiring of who?
well, the witnesses who were present, and so I'm going to call one of those, which
The law
could be
partners?
exactly. And again, I wouldn't even have to do that on the stand. I would just want Your Honor's blessing before I did that because of an abundance of caution and protection of the attorney-client privilege. At that point, I could
sit down, Jim. He's not
offline
done.
become privy to the content of it. It may be nothing. I've just been told that there was that
A
meeting
conversation.
and the circumstances of it, and I don't believe it's protected. And so I'd like to know,
I agree.
what the defendant said at that meeting.
Yes.
Sounds like he's asking for a deposition, Your Honor, and he's got no right to an evidentiary hearing about what happened at a meeting.
No,
in the course
he's
of a
asking
trial.
to call
He's
the
got no
witness.
right to compel people to come testify so we can find out what was said. That's discovery. I mean, state grand jury allows him to do that, but there's no rule that permits him to conduct a deposition,
he can
whether
call
in
the
court
witness.
or out of court. And that's
He
what
can
he's
call the
trying
witness.
to do.
No, he could call the witness. Let
Not
him call the
asking
witness.
to conduct a deposition, Your Honor. I'm actually been doing this out of abundance of caution and protection of the defendant's rights and making sure that we didn't cross the line
Call the
without the
witness.
court's input. And again, the content may be something that's useful or not.
Well, if you'd like
Bring the
to
witness.
brief or send a memo or cases to the court regarding statements made in the presence of counsel and
Third parties.
third parties, whether that's protected by attorney-client privilege or not, then the court can address the issue.
Call the witness.
Yes, sir, Your Honor.
Creighton, he's telling you to call the witness. Call the witness, my
I'll be
guy.
happy to address that Monday morning. I will.
They can't
I do
remember
have
what
a
was
case,
said.
Marshall v. Marshall, 320 Southeastern 2nd 44, which just generally, of course, states the rule that if attorney-client privilege communications are related in the presence of third parties, then the protection is lost.
Correct.
And I can
Ooh.
I can go ahead and hand that one up to Your Honor. And I certainly be prepared to address that in great detail.
There's no privilege there. Jim, this is why you don't represent a client who's your friend when you were there.
Anything further?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Defense, Your Honor.
I'm
We'll be
fascinated.
in recess till 9:30.
All right. The judge is like, get the fuck out. It's the weekend. Well, that was feisty. That was feisty. That was unexpected. It was unexpected. Let's try to, I don't know what's happening.
Let's try to do a summary. What just happened? We're gonna
Start with the end and work backwards to see if we can remember the rest of the day. Let's do a summary of what just happened. So, at the very end of court on Friday, the prosecution's like, Your Honor, one more thing. One more thing. There was a conversation that took place on June 10th. Alec Murdaugh was there. Jim Griffin was there. Others were there. We want to know the contents of that conversation, which means they have a witness who says there was a conversation. But out of an abundance of caution, don't appeal us on this shit. We want the court to rule, so it's not our fault if you're wrong, that conversation with Jim Griffin and others is not protected by attorney-client privilege, which it's not because there's others there. But the others there might also be lawyers. Chris Wilson was probably there. Maybe Chris Wilson is the witness who told them that there was this conversation because he was there with Jim Griffin, John Marvin, and others. And he's cooperating with them. He might have been the one that spilled the tea. Or the law firm partners might have spilled the tea. After September, in June, they're not spilling the tea for shit. After September, when the law firm finds out that he's been stealing from them and then they had to sue him to get the money back, maybe that's when the tea started to flow. Because the circle of trust was broken at that point and it cost everybody a fuck ton of money. You know that the law firm partners' wives were just like, what do you mean you're not getting a bonus this year because you have to pay back his clients for money that he took that he's not paying you back? I'm sorry, what? What are we doing? So, the prosecution brings up that this conversation happened and Alec Murdaugh made statements. And that those statements are not protected by attorney-client privilege because of the presence of third parties, which is true. But what could those statements be? Were they planning? What were they talking about? So the good old boys are at John Marvin's talking about something with Alec. And now they want the conversation to come in. Yep, I'm ready for it. I think the court's going to allow it. But they also want the court to, they're asking the court to cover their ass so they don't tread into grounds that are appealable. Because again, the attorney was there. This doesn't come up very often. It's a very unique and rare circumstance where police are there to interview the defendant in a murder case and his lawyer is sitting there because he's also one of his best friends. It's a rare circumstance. Normally, when attorneys show up to interview, the attorney's there, the defendant is there, the police are there, and that's it. You don't normally have third parties who are going to breach the attorney-client privilege, but the presence of third parties breaches attorney-client privilege. How the fuck did we end up talking about attorney-client privilege so much on this channel? For a while, it was nothing but defamation. And all of a sudden, between the defense attorney in Pennsylvania who wants to go on every media network in the world to talk about the Kohberger case, to Kohberger's own attorney, to these attorneys representing Paul Murdaugh, now representing Alec Murdaugh, all we're talking about is like attorney-client privilege and conflict. All the time. Just so much all the time. So they've got a witness. They're going to bring the witness. I wanted the judge to say bring the witness. They're going to bring the witness because I imagine the loyalty of the brotherhood of the law firm has been breached a little bit with the theft of decades. And we saw that with Jeannie from accounting. who fucking smashed it on the stand yesterday. We're not done with the 404. That means the judge hasn't ruled what the jury's going to hear. We're going to have a whole ass trial on these financial crimes before they come in on this trial. There's no way we're done next week. Like not even a chance that we're done next week. Other testimony that we heard today quickly. We heard that the casings, and we knew this from evidentiary hearings, but the jury heard that the casings found by Maggie Murdaugh's body were the same casings that were shot from a weapon on the property, and they matched from the 300 blackout that had the red dot sight that we heard Will testify about, that they were dialing in March of that year. So we heard about those casings matching, and we heard about casings from the shooting shed matching. And we know from Will that he was there shooting that particular 300 blackout AR in March before hunting season. And they were sighting in the red dot sight because that was not the one with the thermoscope. The thermoscope, the one is the one in custody. The other one is missing after the murder. Wandered off, just like Maggie Murdaugh's phone. We also heard, what else did we hear today? We heard more about the financial crimes today. We heard that Palmetto State Bank, if you overdraw your account and you're Alec Murdaugh to the tune of $350,000, they'll just put some money in your account without you signing loan paperwork. That was interesting. We heard that Moselle and Edisto, the beach house, were both in Maggie Murdaugh's name only. It seems that that was being done in early June to perhaps shift assets for the boat case. So that's less than ideal. And we had a lot of really dry testimony about ammo and birdshot and buckshot and lead and the rest of it. Lead and steel and grain weights. It was a long day in court. It felt very long at the end. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, wait, what? Attorney-client privilege conversation. That's not attorney-client privilege. Fascinating. That's right. The chat is reminding me. We heard from Gloria Satterfield's son, who felt like he was cross-examined. Like the most aggressive cross-examination we have seen in this entire trial was Creighton Waters asking Gloria Satterfield's son about Alec Murdaugh stealing from him. It was intense. And that is what happened on Friday. My brain is tired. We're going to answer some questions and then we are going to wrap. For those of you that are curious, Quick Bits video version is out. The audio version podcast will be out shortly. I just haven't had a chance to go populate it yet. The podcast next week is probably going to deal with Tom Girardi getting indicted, so we can talk about something other than this trial for a minute. I feel like we've lived 100 years this week. A lot happened. Quick Bits is where I put my timeline. So if you're curious about my timeline of the crime, it is in this week's Quick Bits episode on my second channel. Just go to Emily D. Baker Quick Bits here on YouTube, and you will find that if you want to subscribe to that channel for slightly shorter. That one's only 30 minutes. I'm trying to get them down to like 10, 15 ideally, but it's a lot going on. So it's going to take a minute. But if you go to Quick Bits, you can see that. And that episode just went live. So you can go share the love. And if you would like to subscribe to that channel, you can. So that's on Quick Bits. Just put that up an hour ago. It's over on this channel. You'll see the different color of icon, Emily D. Baker Quick Bits. It's this video right here that just went up an hour ago, and y'all can't go watch it yet because you've been here with me. Thank you. There's my week 1 summary, and then some of my other Quick Bits and stuff that goes up there. Videos are there. Shorts are here. So you can find all of that stuff over on Quick Bits. So with that, we're going to get to some questions. We're going to fact around and find out. And then I am going to go rest because I need it and my brain is very tired. For the gifted memberships, thank you. For all of you that are new members, we will be doing a members live. We do them the second Thursday of the month. With trial, if I need to shift it around a little bit, we will just shift it to the week after, but we will do our members only live this week. I will likely record for the members. I will likely record the podcast episode on Sunday. So I will put a note up in the community tab, the members only community tab on Sunday when I'll be recording. So you can join us in the behind the scenes for the recording of my longer podcast. So that's going to be about Tom Girardi and some other stuff. So if you have a membership, you can join us for that. For everyone who gifted memberships, thank you. It's not just a great way to support the channel, but it actually brings more into the law nerd community that can enjoy the law nerd community and not be subject to slow mode when we have 35,000 people in the chat. The benefits of membership that YouTube said, you know what members need? And this is something I didn't even know YouTube had done until the members told me. YouTube was like, if you're a member, no slow mode for you. And so it ends up being one of the perks of being a member here on YouTube. And you get that little badge and you see the colors change as you've been as you've been members longer and longer. So with all of that, let's get to questions. It is time. It is time. It is time. Also, I promised. Yesterday we did Little Robot. Today we're doing Big Robot.
I told you we would do it. I promised. We're going to keep our word, and then we're going to get to questions, and then we're all going to just sit in silence for a moment because I'm so tired. This is terrifying. That's terrifying.
I think I like it best in this voice. I think I like most things best in this voice. I need just to put an auto tune on here.
Oi, 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 oi. So with that, let's do the questions. Thank you guys for subscribing to the Quickie Bits. I appreciate it. We will do it. Where did the pickle come from? It was sent by a law nerd. I have so much mail, you guys. I'm going to try to get to it this weekend. I appreciate you. We have lots of mail, so I appreciate it. It looks like we have some more books to be read on our members only live stream. For those of you that just became members, you can also find the past members only live streams. If you want to see me reading the clam book that I was lovingly sent, and you want to find out what's going on with Linda and her clam, that is on last month members only live stream, and you can find that out for yourself. It's just. Lena asked, why does the court not allow all the evidence to be shown to the jury? They do. The jury gets to see it. Why is info withheld? It's not hard to decide without all the evidence, i.e. blood spatter. Oh, the blood spatter is not evidence yet. So all the evidence the jury gets to see, but it has to be proper evidence. The blood spatter has not been ruled to be proper evidence yet. So that's why. I've got to get a new arm for my camera. Since I've changed my setup, it's been getting a little wiggly. So the blood spatter might not be proper evidence yet. It's subject to a motion, and the prosecution has not sought to admit it. So all the evidence that comes in, the jury gets to see. Not everything is proper evidence. Hopefully that makes sense. The rules of evidence are simple and finite. They're not simple. They're also not finite, but it is what it is. The Helpful Stranger, thank you. Question, started writing a book a couple of weeks ago, about 10% done. Good for you. Need someone other than wifey, someone I talked about during the AH trial, to read to others what to get across, going to self-publish with big A for under $1, not money goal. If willing to read what I have, where do I email? Edited version, almost caught up now. Prefer it with dyslexic, autistic mistakes for all I know. If you want me to read it, it's going to take a while because I am behind on everything, including my own contracts. If the law nerds want to connect with you on that, and my email is public, if the law nerds want to connect with you on that, let them know where to reach out to you in the chat, and they can. So thank you very much for the super chat. My email address is public, and we try to get to them as much as we can. My team always gets to them. I have been swamped. So there are lots in the chat that are like, we would love to read. We would love to read. So yes, absolutely. Share away. And if there's anything you guys want to share with me, you can always share it to the email. How long it takes me to get back is something I cannot promise, but we always see them, and the team always makes sure that I know what's happening in my email. So let's see. Has the coroner testified yet? No. Wait, did the cat? My slipper fell. No, we have not heard from the medical examiner yet. I don't know why we haven't heard from the medical examiner yet. It might be that they wanted all this other evidence to come in, so the coroner made sense. I don't know until we see the coroner's testimony why. So we'll see. Do we not have a Law Nerd Discord? We do not have a Law Nerd Discord at this point. We have our Patreon, we have our members tabs, we have the tabs on the channel under the community tab, but I do not manage and moderate a Discord at this point. Do we really think that Maggie didn't know about the money troubles? She obviously knows about the reasoning behind moving the estates to her name. I don't know if she thought they were trying to hide it from the boat case. We don't have any evidence that she didn't know. So right now we don't have any evidence. We don't have any evidence about that. So sorry, we don't. I don't know why I said sorry for that. Not sorry. We just don't. We don't have any evidence of that. Hopefully we will. But I have no idea. I'm hoping that this new convo has some incriminating statements. I don't know if it will or if it won't. And neither does the state, is the thing. The state doesn't know if they're incriminating or not. Here's the thing. We know, I think we're down to this wasn't like a stranger. This is somebody who knew the property. This is somebody who knew where these guns would be and had ready access to them quickly. I think the cell phone data shows that these deaths, and again, that's in my quick bits today, that these deaths happened right around 8:49, 8:50 p.m. I think that's what the cell phone evidence shows. Do I know if the prosecution has made that clear enough for the jury at this point? Sure don't know that. Sure don't know if that has become apparent to the jury. That's me digging through everything and putting it together going, this is when the cell phone activity stopped. But the prosecution was very clear. This is when the phone's locked forever, and they said it in their opening, and they'll say it again in their closing. And Paul, it's so hard to look at his cell phone stuff because it's just so real and so just like young adult. And so it's just so human, right? He's talking to a girl about seeing a movie. The last text messages he reads is about picking a movie. He's texting back and forth with his friend about his friend's dog, Cash, adorable dog, Cash. And he's actively engaged in that, like actively engaged in these texts. And then it just stops. And the defense showed their hand a little bit and saying, oh, the phone's at 2%. So of course he's going to stop texting. I don't know. He's in the middle of texting about picking a movie with someone, and he hasn't sent the video that he promised Rogan he was going to send. Does it seem that he would just stop responding to them? Or does it seem he would send those things to them and say, got to charge my phone? It doesn't seem like he would just ghost in the middle of these conversations for an hour and then the murders happen. It seems more likely to me that he was in the middle of those conversations. He took that video to send to Rogan. He never got to initiate sending it because he was murdered right after he took that video. That makes more logical sense to me because the cell phone stuff gives you a fixed timeline. And the fixed timeline makes sense. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense any other way to me. It's just sad. It's just sad. So I think we'll see the defense pushing that timeline back. But again, somebody's not getting in there that Paul doesn't, or that Alec doesn't see in the time he's walking back to the home. And it just doesn't make sense. And it just doesn't make sense. Do I think we still have doubt? Yes, there's still doubt, but there are things here that are starting to narrow down this timeline to either Alec did it or someone that was very intimately connected with this family did it. And if Alec was the target of it, then he was right at the kennels with them. So why is he still alive? If somebody came onto this property to attack this family, he was right there at the kennels with them moments before this happened. Why is he still alive and on trial? I have questions. Question, do jurors have notepads to take notes or make, not in this case, they don't. Not in this case, they don't. So his cell phone battery didn't die until 10:34 p.m. So do you think the surprise witness will be targeted for testifying? I don't think there's anyone left to target people. I don't know. I think the circle of trust has been broken with the law firm. I think Alec put everybody in a terrible position with all the financial crimes. And we've already seen Chris Wilson testify. So we'll see. 2% iPhone lasts quite a while for me with heavy use. And they talked about that with the They talked about that with the cell phone expert as well. The prosecution needs to do a better job of tying these dots together, and we'll see if they do. Did we ever find out if Chris Wilson, the witness, was the one who emailed claiming there was an issue with the jury? They didn't ask at all. Good memory. They did not ask at all. So, any thoughts on the Stephen Smith case getting reopened after Buster was buccal swabbed for this case? I don't know if those two things are connected. It is my understanding, because they got Paul's phone and Buster's phone very close in time, I believe it is cell phone data, but I don't think it's a coincidence. And I hope that Stephen Smith's family gets justice. Victor Mann said Hogue walked into his house today. I knew he was coming home today, and I have heard this. I am very excited for my friend. The fact that he has recovered so fulsomely is something I am incredibly proud of him for. It has been tremendously hard work. Rehab is tremendously hard work after any type of injury, but especially after a traumatic brain injury. And he suffered from a stroke. And I am so happy for him. I'm sure his kids and Miss Hogue are so happy to have him home. I'm thrilled for him. Is the medical examiner testimony will be harrowing? It's going to be very difficult testimony. It's really graphic. They try not to make it graphic, but it's a lot of testimony. It's a Hotmail account, really hard to get an email address, though. My email address mine is just on my Twitter account. It's at the bottom of my channel description. The Emily D. Baker at Semaphore is down there, so you can get it. Are you aware of, have any thoughts on Maggie changing her will in December 22? Sister had been the executor, was revised 6 months before her death. That hasn't come into evidence. I have heard tale, but I have not seen evidence. So I have not seen evidence of it. Is Runkle going to pop on for gun stuff? I am going to pop off pretty quickly. I want Runkle to do a video on the gun stuff, and I'm sure that he will. Was like a shot of espresso, wasn't it? Yeah, at the end of the day, that sure was. I think the conversation is Rogan saying to Maggie's parents that he heard Alec at the kennels, and that Alec jumping up to say he wasn't there. That testimony already came in, though. So it might be connected to that conversation, but it's not that conversation. I don't remember if that conversation happened at Moselle or happened at John Marvin's. So this is a conversation that clearly happened at John Marvin's, and I don't remember if Rogan's conversation, I thought, happened at Moselle, but we've had a lot of information, and I would have to go back to my notes. But that's already come in. So that can't be it, because that's already been elicited and that's already come in. Do you think they dropped that witness issue just before the weekend on purpose? I mean, I think it was intentional that they needed to get to it on Monday and they wanted to give the court a heads up, but they put it in their pretrial motions. So no, it's not a surprise to the defense. The defense, I think, just didn't what we heard Dick say was, "Oh, I didn't know what was it related to." Well, now you know what it's related to. So Laura said, spending my birthday at the kennels and stables with Lawnards and EB. No guns, just hounds and horses. Hounds and horses sounds like a delightful way to spend the day. Also, over on Twitter, there are so many people, like everybody's initials are EB, right? When we were going through Depp Heard, it was Elaine Bredehoft, and I was like, wait, are we talking about me? No, I'm EDB, not EB. And I was on Twitter, and there was something going off with somebody named EB, and I'm like, who is I'm not, what? I got confused, and I got tagged and stuff, and I'm like, that's not me. I'm EDB. I don't know who EB is there. So it seems like it's constant. So when I look at the Emily B, I'm like, why? There's lots of EB initials. I'm just glad that we can put the D in there, just be EDB. So it makes it much easier to stay clear. But when we were going through the ECB and the EDB, I was like, Elaine Charlson, Bredehoft. Let's just leave her with that. And Eric Bland too. Yes, lots of EBs. Lots of EBs. Eric Bland signs his tweets EB. It's a lot of EBs. It's funny because every now and then I get confused. I'm like, we're not talking about me, right? The Helpful Stranger, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I like this witness and I don't like Jim trying to confuse. That's Jim's job. So I get it. It can be frustrating. And the jury might just be like, oh, Jim, we're over it. That's something Jim have to, that's others, the brain. That's something Jim has to be mindful of, watching how the jury's responding to his questioning. Because if there's a witness you really don't like, when the attorney goes in and goes in and goes in, you're like, get him, finish him, ask the question, get it. So it just depends on the witness. When it's a witness you really like, the jury's like, we don't need it. Since Jim was there for the convo, even if he doesn't remember, is the defense considered already having that info? I think so. I think it's, and the defendant was there, so the defendant knows. Both of them know. How does he stay so patient and unflustered? This witness was delightful and very unbothered. Apologies if I already answered. I fell asleep. Could they be waiting for demonstratives until at the phone GPS ME has been introduced? I hope not, because you need the jury to come along with you every step of the way. Every single step of the way. My father was an R&H detective. For everybody else, that's robbery homicide for 30 years, and always said there's no such thing as multiple coincidences, usually while yelling at me, though. It's like, I swear, I left when I said I left. I ran out of gas and got a flat tire, and there was a car crash. It wasn't that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. But yes, there multiple coincidences generally mean there's no coincidence at all. Will Alec have told his defense his truth? I don't know. I don't know. What we saw in the HBO documentary, Jim Griffin saying there's no conflict for me because I 100% believe Alec didn't do this, but that was his belief. I don't know what Alec would have told his attorneys, but what I do know is that the members of his law firm didn't perceive that he was stealing from them for decades. His clients didn't think they had been stolen from. So the one thing we know about Alec Murdaugh for certain is that he is a convincing liar. We also know that when he originally reported the roadside incident, he sounds a lot like he does on the 911 call when he reports his wife and son's death. Will we see that 911 call? I don't know, but he sure sounds a lot the same. So if he told his defense something and they still believe him because they are still his brothers, I don't know what they believe. They've got to be questioning things. I need to know. What I need to know at the end of today is, when are we getting to whose DNA is on the shotgun? Because wouldn't someone have cleaned the gun after hunting? And if the gun looks entirely clean, is it reasonable that Maggie's DNA would be kind of in the gun? What we've already established is that Maggie didn't really love Moselle. She loved the beach. She messed around at Moselle with the dogs. That's all we've ever heard. We have never heard anyone say Maggie liked to go out shooting with them. It was always that the guys wanted to go out shooting. So did Alec transfer DNA from Maggie onto the gun? And if he did, why was he completely clean? It raises other inconsistencies, and the rest of the gun is clean. And the gun doesn't have any fingerprints. So if the gun's got blood on it and that blood or DNA is Maggie's and the gun has no fingerprints on it, somebody wiped down the gun and somebody wiped down Alec Murdaugh. I've got questions, but the prosecution hasn't presented it yet, so we don't know. But the prosecution's not going to bring that up if it's not going to matter. Well, no, I can't say that about this prosecution team. I hope that the prosecution's not going to bring that up if it's not going to matter. So, do they have the clothes he was in before the murders? Haven't heard anything about that. Sure haven't. Will the guy who shot Alec in the head testify? God, I hope so. He's pending trials. I don't know what he can testify to, but he's on the witness list. And let me tell you what, the second this prosecution says they're calling Eddie Smith, I'm going to be in here like this. We're going to be like, I will lose my mind when they call Eddie Smith. When they started talking about him today in the financial data, that he had 10 different ways that he was getting paid by Alec, I was like, oh, tell me more, because there is so much else going on there. But I don't know. I'm sure they took a DNA swab from him. They would have to. What happens if a yes or no question doesn't have an absolute? It's up to the witness to say, I can't answer yes or no and have to deal with the fact that they can't answer yes or no. Will Alec have told his defense the truth? So that's a long way to say, I don't know what Alec would have told his defense, and I don't know if what he told them is the truth. I don't know if they want to know. And Jim Griffin is a friend, a family friend, and they are honored to represent Alec. Then they're representing him in the financial crimes too. I don't know how they're going to do that. But I think that if Alec is convicted of this, they're going to try to plea all the financial crimes. And I wonder if he's not convicted of this, if they'll try to plea the financial crimes. I've seen some suggestions that they wonder if these financial crimes will go federal or if Alec wants them to go federal so he can go to federal prison instead of state prison. But that's depending on whether he gets convicted here. I don't know. We'll see. I wonder if the malfunction could be a result of loading improper ammo habitually. I don't know. Maybe. Is it a yes or no question? Can you say these guns were used or not? They could ask that. And he's like, what I can say is that blah, 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 blah. A local said that he thinks Paul and Alec were in it together. He thinks Paul shot Maggie and then Alec double-crossed Paul and shot him. I mean, that's all conjecture. I don't know. And I don't know why. There's a lot of I don't knows in this case at this point. How is the defense trying to explain how he was with them within minutes of their death, but didn't do it? How do they explain away the timing? I don't know. I don't know how they explain away the timing. Not sure if you answered this. What is the difference between Dr. Hughes looking at her notes and Mr. Greer? Dr. Hughes didn't refresh her recollection with her notes. She was reading them into the record and she did not ask. This witness said, let me refresh my recollection, looked at his notes, closed his notes, and then testified. So it is the difference between checking the information. Some of this witness's notes will become testimony, or some of the results will become evidence. Dr. Hughes's notes were never evidence, and they can't be evidence. His results are evidence, so he can read off the results sheet. Those are evidence and going into evidence. And his notes, he's allowed to refresh from the, let me refresh at my report, look at it, and then can talk about it contemporaneously. So that's the difference. Dr. Hughes was all sneaky about it and was reading off of her notes. Have they searched his mother's home? We heard an opening that in September, something was recovered from his mother's home. So it looks like to me, it's my opinion. It's my opinion. It seems like when the financial shit hit the fan and he got removed from his law firm and then the roadside incident happened, that's when SLED in the AG's office went, oh, maybe we should execute some more search warrants. But I also don't remember exactly the date when the solicitor's office recused themselves. I think it was in August, right before all the shit hit the fan. I wonder if Duffy Stone had a heads up about that. I think maybe. But the solicitor's office had it June, July, and at least August. So I think these redone search warrants or these re-executed searches were done once the case got over to the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office started doing all of the other information. So that's interesting stuff. Do you think the Murdaugh family will ever regain the bond they had with law enforcement, or do you think their legacy's a goner forever and ever? I would defer to someone in the community and who is familiar with this community more than I am. I think there's probably a lot of questions here, but I don't know how the community feels. It seems like a lot in the community, from what I've seen, think that he probably did it and aren't confident that the law will work out justice. So I truly don't know, but it's a great question. But I think things are forever. I think things are forever changed. In what ways they are, I'm not sure. Suze said a big red flag for me was in Alec's first interview, stopping his narrative and finding out his son and wife dead and explaining fiddling with Paul's phone. Seemed like he was trying to cover his tracks. I want to go back and look at his interview when I see everything else. So at the time, you never know if it's shock or grief or what, but you've got to look at it in context, and I want to go back and look at it in context. Janice said, if I was a juror, I'd be screaming to be able to take notes. I'm so confused right now. And I know the jury is too. I know they are too. That's not the jury's fault. That's the prosecution's fault. When the jury is confused, it is the prosecution's fault. So, and we answered this one earlier. It's been a long day. It absolutely has. Apparently, Curdy Eddie Smith is going to testify. I mean, he's on the witness list. I think he will. There are some things he might have to plead the fifth for, but that day is going to be great. I don't know what day he's testifying, but if it's while I'm on a plane, I will lose my mind because I do have to travel next week. So fingers crossed it's not while I'm in flight. Though by saying that, I have probably cursed myself. So we'll see how it goes on Monday. I got to go put a bunch of stuff in my calendar. With that, y'all, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for being Law Nerds. Don't forget to go show the new video up on the Shorts channel some love. Show the Quick Bits podcast some love. It's new, but so many of you, and that show is really for our community. So many of you have had so many positive things to say about it that it helps that even when you go through the full days with me in the background with your work day and whatever you're doing during your days, that sometimes it just distills the most important points and the stuff that sticks out. And I really appreciate that feedback. Thank you so much. It really is something I created for the community so that when you want to stay on top of a case, you can, or if you don't want to invest in the trial streams, you can keep up with what's going on if this trial is not for you, but you're still curious. So thank you for that. Thank you for being Law Nerds. I will see you on Monday morning. Same bat time, same bat channel, 8:25-ish. Court starts at 8:30 with more 404 motions, which means more of the juicy outside the presence of the jury. And aren't we all ready for some more of that? Let's find out what happened in that conversation, shall we? I want to know what Alex said. And hopefully we get into that Monday morning. You can find all the Law Nerd goodies at lawnerdshop.com. Connect with me on social media at the Emily D. Baker. And don't forget to check out my podcasts, The Emily Show, and the new podcast, Quick Bits, summarizing everything I talk about on my Tuesday and Thursday live streams. You know, when you only have time for just the quick bits.